that's been issued for us. Now that includes Winnipeg, areas around Steinbach, St. Adolphe to the southeast, also up to Selkirk and over to Dugald, Beausejour, Portage la Prairie to the west, into Morden Winkler, and actually right through the Whiteshell and Pinawa area and Sprague as well. So that's what we're looking at. And it sure has been foggy, frankly, all week long. I know in the evenings I've been out and the tops of the buildings are just fogged over. It's like we're living in London or Vancouver or somewhere other than the prairies right now. In Winnipeg, our high today is going to be 2 degrees, and tonight we're expecting periods of rain, about 5 millimeters. Thanks for being with us. 3 minutes to 6 o'clock. Look who's back. Yay! Corey Funk. We've all been kind of on different shifts this week. So this morning, nice to have Corey back, our studio director, and he'll cover the commute. Abby Adiemi back in his regular spot as well. Hi, Abby. Abby covers weather on the program and is our technical producer. And Travis Peterson's here as well behind the controls of YouTube. Good morning, Travis. Heather Wells is also in our news center, and she's here now with morning headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, some northern Manitoba communities face a potential winter season with no ice road. Keewatin Tribal Council Grand Chief Walter Westesakut, federal and provincial governments and other leaders met yesterday to try to come up with a plan. Westesakut says no matter what, the affected First Nations will get their essential supplies. So we'll hear more about what they talked about. As well, Peguis First Nation has hired new lawyers to fight a legal claim over outstanding loans. We'll hear what that's about in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
In the program this morning, coming up after 8 in studio, we are going to have a conversation with the new head of Manitoba Public Insurance. We'll hear what she plans to do for the future of the Crown Corporation. The last head of MPI left under some controversy, issues with the management structures, and the new head was there during that time. So we're going to talk to her about her vision moving forward. In addition, we're going to follow up on a letter we heard about yesterday from a nursing student who has concerns, and we're going to hear from the union this morning, the nurses union, about reaction to that. So stay tuned. Right now, though, World Report at 6.
On Cue with Tom Power.
In the new series Feud, Capote versus the Swans, the actor Molly Ringwald plays Joanne Carson, wife of Johnny Carson, and friend to the writer Truman Capote. Molly opens up about that role and what it was actually like to be an icon back in the days of the Breakfast Club.
I have just as many feelings as you do, and it hurts just as much when somebody steps all over them.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcast.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. In Pakistan, explosions have killed 26 people outside the offices of 2 political parties. An ambulance rushes the wounded to hospital in a town near Quetta. The attacks come ahead of tomorrow's elections. This is the latest in a campaign marred by violence and harassment. Much of it is directed at Imran Khan and his party. Even though he's in jail, the former prime minister is a big factor in the election. Salima Shivji has more from Islamabad.
At a small gathering days before the election, Imran Khan supporters rally, calling for everyone to vote for the former prime minister. Khan is not here. He's in jail, barred from running in this election. And his party, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, has been the target of a crackdown, what they say is orchestrated by the military to sideline them, a charge the army denies. Shoaib Shaheen is still openly campaigning, but many of his fellow PTI politicians are in hiding.
There is a hindrance on behalf of the police, on behalf of the administration. The police is harassing our supporters, and sometimes they are stopping their businesses.
Observers say this is the least credible election in years, in a country that has seen its fair share of vote-rigging accusations. The man widely expected to win Thursday's vote is Nawaz Sharif, a 3-time prime minister looking for a 4th mandate, as he works the crowd. Sharif was previously barred from contesting another election in 2017 and convicted of corruption, but those rulings have been overturned. His path to power cleared by an alleged backroom deal with Pakistan's army generals. For many here, even those attending political rallies, the voting process offers little hope. I have no faith in this country. We need brand new politicians, says 23-year-old Palwasha Afaq. There are no fair elections here. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Islamabad.
Voters in Nevada made it clear They are not impressed with their pool of Republican presidential nominees. In last night's primary, more than 62% voted for none of the three candidates on the ballot. That includes former U.S. Ambassador and South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Republican frontrunner Donald Trump was not on that ballot, but he will be on the ballot for the Nevada caucuses tomorrow. It was a surprising defeat for Republicans in the House of Representatives last night. Members voted not to impeach U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. The vote was an attempt to hold the Biden administration accountable for the issue at the border with Mexico. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me from Washington. Richard, what happened with this vote?
Yeah, Republicans simply didn't have the votes, ending in an embarrassing defeat of their own creation, of the slim Republican majority voting to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. He would have been the second cabinet official to be impeached in U.S. history. Republicans gave speech after speech accusing Mayorkas of breaking the law by allowing millions of migrants to cross illegally into the U.S. from Mexico. But in the end, the impeachment vote backfired, exposing dysfunction within the party and a failure of Speaker Johnson's leadership. He's breaking the cardinal rule. You don't put a bill on the floor unless you know you have the votes. At least 3 Republicans joined with Democrats and voted against impeachment. Republican Ken Buck voted against his party, saying impeaching Mayorkas would set a dangerous precedent.
I think the principle is very clear that Mayorkas did not commit a high crime or misdemeanor. We are setting new levels, low levels, for these impeachments.
Now, Republicans are making immigration a central issue this election, but many say this vote was embarrassing and shameful.
Richard, what does this all mean going forward?
Well, the House Speaker says he'll try again, likely within days. But remember, this party has such a slim majority in the House. Not all Republicans could show up to last night's vote. So get ready for round 2. But even if the House somehow impeaches Mayorkas, the trial will certainly not pass the Democrat-controlled Senate. So there's lots of politics here and show, but all set up to fail in the end.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is meeting with leaders in Israel. They are discussing the ceasefire counteroffer from Hamas. A U.S. brokered deal was proposed last week. In its counteroffer, Hamas is calling for a 4.5-month truce. During that time, all hostages would be released in 3 stages. Palestinians imprisoned in Israel would also be freed. The militant group is also demanding more aid for Palestinians in Gaza. While those negotiations carry on in Israel, politicians here in Canada are pushing universities to provide a safe environment. 13 MPs have written a letter. They are asking universities what they're doing to protect students and employees who advocate on behalf of Jews or Palestinians. Rafi Boudjikanian reports.
Montreal's Concordia University last November. Palestinian and Jewish student groups clashing over the fighting between Israel and Hamas. Security guards and even police intervened. Also in November, York University threatened to punish 3 student unions over a statement they issued. It called what Palestinians were going through genocide and saluted Hamas's attack that killed 1,200 Israelis.
We should have this conversation with the university presidents.
Shafkat Ali is the Liberal MP for Brampton Centre. He has written a letter to Canadian universities signed by 10 other Liberals and the Green Party's 2 MPs. It asks the schools how they are protecting students, faculty and staff from repercussions for speaking their minds. The letter does not mention specific incidents.
Freedom of expression is a fundamental to our democracy.
Dr. Yipeng Ji is welcoming the move.
It, I think, calls attention to the kind of environment and this climate.
G was a medical resident at the University of Ottawa until it suspended him over pro-Palestinian social media posts. He says the school eventually offered to reinstate him, but he declined. He wonders if the spotlight from this kind of letter might have made a difference in his suspension.
You know, maybe that wouldn't have happened in the first place.
The MPs want the universities to respond by the end of February. Rafi Boudjikanian on CBC News, Ottawa.
Parts of Kyiv have no electricity this morning. The mayor says power lines were downed last night in a Russian attack. Air raid sirens warning people to take shelter. A wave of 64 missiles and drones were fired across Ukraine Air defense systems were triggered. Buildings in Kiev caught fire. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says at least 2 people have been killed and 10 more have been injured. The Roman Catholic Archbishop of Montreal is taking the Quebec government to court, arguing Quebec's medical aid in dying law violates the Charter of Rights. It forces Catholic palliative care homes to offer medically assisted deaths. Alison Northcott reports.
It goes against the freedom of conscience.
Archbishop Christian Lapine is asking the court to invalidate part of Quebec's end-of-life care law that requires palliative care homes to offer medical aid in dying. The court challenge centers around a facility located in a former Catholic church. The lawsuit says medical aid in dying is against church doctrine and Lapine's personal convictions. Quebec's law, the Archbishop says, violates the provincial and Canadian charters.
It's freedom of religion, but also freedom of conscience. And it's about that we want to live in a democracy, that we want where we want freedom of conscience, where we want for the individual, for institutions.
This has been a major issue since medical assistance in dying became legal in Canada, from coast to coast.
Tim Holland is a MAID provider and head of the bioethics department at Dalhousie University in Halifax. He says while Quebec has its own provincial law, there have been similar debates in other provinces around faith-based institutions under the federal law.
While I do understand where the Catholic Church is coming from, it's essential to understand that these palliative care facilities are built for patients. And so at the heart of this, we have to respect patient rights.
While some provinces have made some exemptions, the Quebec government said in a statement its intentions are clear to ensure anyone in a palliative care home can receive medical aid in dying if they wish. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
If you have been following the plight of those orcas trapped in ice off the coast of Japan, we have some good news. The whales are free. Japanese officials say they managed to escape by themselves. People around the world have been watching drone footage of the orcas. It showed the pod of about 10 whales crammed into the same hole, surrounded by broken chunks of ice. They were poking their heads out, gasping for air. The nearest country, Japan, said it was impossible to rescue the whales, but officials monitoring the situation now say they believe the orcas escaped safely. We leave you now with the Free Willy theme. That's World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Cute and important. Go Whales. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on CBC 89.3 on the app or YouTube. Boy, foggy again. Abby's going to talk about an advisory that's been issued this morning. It does include the city of Winnipeg, so we'll get to that in a moment. Thanks for joining us on your Wednesday morning, midweek into February here. This hour on the program, we're going to hear from a Winnipeg chef who fed people, some 750 of them, for a pre-Grammy dinner. So what did Snoop Dogg think of the menu? We'll find out. In addition, this hour on the program, there is a push on right now for people to jump. Have you heard of the jump test for appendicitis? Our host, Dr. Raj Bhardwaj, is going to join us to talk about it this morning. It's made its move on social media. He says it actually might work, but there's some cautions there. So if you're a parent and you're getting your kids to jump up and down, hang on. Dr. Raj is here just before 7 o'clock. Right now, Heather Wells is in to tell us what's making news this morning. Good morning. Heather Wells, Corey Funk, howdy. Abby Adiyemi. How is everyone? We're all back in our regular spots. Heather, how was your ride in from South Winnipeg? Yeah, lots of potholes on my drive. And you, Corey, how was the run?
I ran down the middle of the road because those sidewalks were way too slippery.
Yeah, there's been some stories this week. Of course, Councillor Matt Allard is banging the drum to have improvement on sidewalks. There's a lot of people on the roadways right now. Hard not to notice. So, Abby, you're the man with the plan in hand. What are we looking for today with the weather?
Fog comes down either or already occurring as we speak right now. So this fog is anticipated to dissipate later this morning. But until then, I'll just advise travelers to really be careful because once this fog really comes so low, it's going to be very, very hard to see. Drivers just take extra caution. Visibility might suddenly just drop to near zero. So you need to take it easy on the highway. But right now, Winnipeg is at 1 degree.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Well, if you are going to give a report from the highway or from in the city, you're going to be calling Corey. What's up right now?
Yeah, right now, probably the fog is the biggest issue. I'm just taking a preliminary look right now at Manitoba 511. And actually, most of the poor visibility that's being reported on the highways right now is mostly in the Interlake around the Toulon, Arborg area. And then also around Minnedosa, Neepawa. That's what's showing up on the Manitoba 511 highway map right now. But I'm curious what you're seeing out there. Let me know. Or, yeah, of course, not seeing because of this fog. Give me an update. But if you're here in the city on the roads, on the sidewalks, on the bike lanes, let me know too.
I saw this super interesting thing last night. It was about fog, and it was not about fog in Manitoba. It was about fog in the UK, and it was actually a show that was restoring a painting. But the painting had this green hue to it, and I thought it was dirty and going to be cleaned. But actually, the person that brought it in, who was a sailor, said this is the pea fog, the pea soup fog, and talked about being through it and having lived through it. And he said it is actually green, and he said it stinks.
Oh my gosh.
So I don't know if anyone out there, we got a lot of UK expats. I don't know if anyone out there has ever lived through that, but I'd not known what that is.
I had no idea. I lived in Newfoundland for a while. Never saw that.
No.
So wild. Okay.
Yeah,
well, hopefully that doesn't make its way over here.
No, hopefully not. Anyway, right now, Interlake, Neepawa, you said little foggy.
Yeah. And if you have any other updates for me, give me a call on the commuter line, 204-788-3093.
Well, let's start with food, shall we? A local chef got the opportunity of a lifetime last weekend. He flew out to LA and he catered a pre-Grammy dinner for about 750 people. On the guest list, celebs like Snoop Dogg and Busta Rhymes. He only found out, though, who he was cooking for a day before the event. Jesse Friesen is the current executive chef for Academy Hospitality here in the city. He spoke to CBC's Brittany Greenslade yesterday about this on Up to Speed.
Good afternoon, Jesse.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, this is exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. Still a little surreal to be back in Winnipeg.
How did you find out you were going to be catering this dinner party in LA?
So I was at the Forks 2 Thursdays ago. I was actually doing a chef collaboration night at the Raw Almond, hosted by Mandel Hitzer every year. And my boss texted me saying, hey, we got to talk. And then when we talked, this is what he said. We're going to LA early next week. We got a big party that we're catering, and he gave me very little details. And at first I thought it was maybe he's pulling my leg a little bit. But then when we had the talk the next day, I realized, okay, cool, let's do this. And it wasn't really surreal until it wasn't really real until, we're on the Zoom calls and getting all the parts moving. But this past Wednesday, I was on my flight there, and I just got back yesterday.
I think when most people hear from their boss, we have to talk, you think something bad. So, this was something amazing. Did you have to go through any sort of interviews, or what was the process like?
So we have a strong connection through someone in Winnipeg who is connected through kind of like the music and fashion industry in LA. And that's how this all came apart. So there wasn't really much interviews because I had kind of connected with these gentlemen in LA before. We just had never met in person. So I kind of we had to put our money where our mouth was. And yeah, there wasn't really much interviews. It was just kind of like, if you can pull this off, like we got you, we'll give you whatever you need and to make it happen. And then that's what we did.
Amazing to have somebody in that room speaking your name without you even knowing. Incredible.
Thank you.
So when did you find out who the dinner party was for? Because I think that's super cool.
So when we landed, and this is very, very unique, and this is what my host said, it was my first time to LA, and he had picked me up from the airport, and the first thing we did was go for a site visit. And that was at the Goldstein residence in Beverly Hills, which is a major spot for, models, shoots, movies, all that. And that was the first place I went. So I knew it was for someone big. I knew it was for a record label, but I didn't really know too much until we were prepping and we had met the people that had hired us, who ended up being a very big stylist for people like Justin Bieber and Jay-Z and those kind of musicians. So the day before we were ready to go, they were kind of like, forgot to tell you, but this is for Death Row Records.
Wow.
And at that point, I was almost shell shocked that was happening. And then obviously, I'm a huge fan of hip hop. I always have been, and I know there's been a lot of artists come and go from that record label. But Snoop Dogg's obviously like the number one artist, and I believe he owns it now too. So, was crossing my fingers we'd cross paths at the event.
I mean, those are some big names.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you get to meet any of them?
No, I didn't. I did meet a couple of people, brush some elbows with some other people, but I did not. I did see them both, and I did see them eating the food with a big smile on their face, so that was good. But I didn't. Between their security entourage, it wasn't going to happen, and the amount of people at the party as well.
You don't want to get too close.
For sure.
So what was it like just being there? I mean, these are big names. This is a big event, and something that came about so fast.
It was surreal. I mean, I've never been to LA, so I was in foreign territory, and it wasn't like I was hired to work with the team. I was hired to lead the team to prepare the food. And another thing that I was a little out of my comfort zone was the food we were preparing. The stylist that I'd mentioned, Ugo Mosey, he's from West Africa, and what he wanted to do was showcase the up and coming cuisine from there that's getting really big in bigger cities in the United States. So he had given me his grandmother's recipes for all these dishes that I had never cooked before. And it wasn't like, cook this for me and my friends. It was cook this for 750 people. So doing it on a big scale was a challenge as well. But he came with his sister and his team on the day before, and they tried everything, and they gave me the green light. So that was the best.
That's got to be nerve-wracking. You get grandma's recipes, and it's something you've never cooked. So not only do you have to make it for them, but 750 people.
It was crazy, and I was a little nervous for sure, especially because they were talking off to the side a little bit, and I was like, what am I going to do if they don't like it? I got to restart, and I'd spent 2 days on this. But they came in, and they had big smiles on their face, and they were very happy.
Can you tell us about some of the dishes? I wish we had you in studio so that I could be, trying some of these. We'll have to do that next time, but maybe you can just make us salivate and tell us a little bit about them.
For sure. So the number one thing we made was jollof rice. So that's from essentially what you do is you make a jollof sauce. It's kind of like a red pepper tomato-based curry sauce that stews all day, and then you cook rice in it. It's very popular in West Africa. And then we made a Nigerian chicken stew, a beef stew. We made some fried plantains, and then we also did what was my favorite. It's called egusi, and it's very traditional food from Nigeria. And it's a stew that's cooked down with a lot of different ingredients that are exotic, like locust beans, different types of curries and stuff like that. And then it has ground melon seeds to finish it, so it kind of looks almost like couscous. But one thing I was really glad for was when they were checking in the first day, Ugo had gave me a couple pointers on how his grandma would make it and how he makes it, which went very far, and actually learned quite a bit about that from him. So I appreciate that. And traditionally that dish is served with crayfish, but we wanted to do it vegan. So we went to Little Tokyo and picked up some super fresh seaweed to add last second. So it kind of had that taste of the sea, although it was vegan. I thought it brilliant. Yeah.
What a really cool experience.
It was amazing.
What were your takeaways from this? I mean, you just went from doing, raw almond near the river, which is something very unique to Manitoba, to now something like this on a totally different scale for the first time.
Like knowing people and globally and locally is a huge thing that and being on good terms with people, being a good person will get you places. But I also think that working hard is, and again, making sure that you can deliver based on what you say is a huge thing. And the amount of compliments that my team and I had got at the night of, and from all these high end, people that you'd recognize on TV and music was just something else. And you know what, it kind of complemented what I do every day, but just on a bigger scale, because, I was out there for 5 days. I got raw almond again tomorrow. And then my wife and I run a market, an alternative market, the Wicked Bazaar. We got that on Saturday. So we're just grinding it out all the time. And we love doing this stuff. It's exciting.
A very busy time for you. This was something I'm sure that wasn't even on your radar. What's the next dream if this wasn't even one that was there?
I hope that we made enough of an impact, and my gut's telling me we did, that they'll invite us back to do another one.
Incredible. Chef, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's fun, hey? What an interesting meeting that would be. You would never be expecting that to be what your boss would say. That is Brittany Greenslade, who was guest hosting Up to Speed yesterday in conversation with Winnipeg chef Jesse Friesen, the current executive chef, by the way, for Academy Hospitality.
A podcast for runners that only works if you're actually running. A police recruitment campaign that capitalized on the popularity of true crime. And an alternative audio track for Disney's Pocahontas that tells the truth behind the fairy tale.
We carry our ancestors with us.
Putting the awe in audio on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
6:24 a.m. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC's Information Radio. Thanks for spending some time with the morning show this morning. Hopefully everything is well in your house. It is just strange weather. That continues today. Yes, mild. We've been talking all about that. But rain. Tonight we're expecting 5 millimeters of rain. And this morning, very foggy. Fog advisory has been issued, and that does include the city of Winnipeg. Well, next on the show, there's a major push right now for Canadians to buy electric vehicles. But what about turning your old gas car into an EV? A listener wrote into CBC's Climate Solutions show, What on Earth? Asking that question. Is that even possible? And what would you need to do that? So Rochelle Sanders went out to answer it.
That's my old beater, a 16-year-old Honda Fit. If the Canadian government has its way, it's a dying breed. The federal government says by 2035, any new car you buy will have to be zero emissions. That makes some people wonder, what about all the gas cars already on the road?
How do we deal with that? Most of them, I would guess, are roadworthy. Why can't we do conversions? We do conversions with other things.
That's Sharon Card in Courtenay, BC. Sharon knows that EVs are in high demand and they're expensive. She wonders if we could help solve those problems and conserve resources if we electrified some of the nearly 24 million gas cars on Canadian roads. Like her old Subaru or my Honda Fit. But swapping internal combustion engines for electric motors isn't a simple process.
It's not as easy as folks think it is, of just removing the engine and just plopping in electric motors. There's actually a lot involved. There's a lot of engineering involved as well.
Sloan Paul is CEO and founder of ARC Motor Company in Peterborough, Ontario. ARC is one of a few companies around Canada that convert gas cars to electric. Sloan and her brother Tom Chepp created the company after Sloan couldn't find a shop to electrify her classic 1969 Ford Bronco.
Classic cars don't have the reputation of being really great for the environment. They're gas guzzlers, they're loud. And for me, I'm very conscious of the environment and what I do to impact it. So then I thought, hey, this is a really great opportunity to do something here in Canada.
Tom describes the work they do as de-icing cars. Get it? ICE? ICE stands for internal combustion engine. It's a good pun, right? So how do they do it? First, they pull out all of the pieces of the drivetrain that use combustion.
Once you pull out all the components you don't need, you then have to look at it and figure out where you can put the components that you do need, which isn't always easy. It varies greatly from vehicle to vehicle. We kind of find out what space we have to work with 3D scanning.
Tom said one of the big challenges is finding the right spot for the large, heavy batteries. They convert classic cars, the kinds of cars that have investment value and that are beloved by their owners, because all of this can be expensive. Their conversions start at around $75,000. But there are a lot of people working on that cost issue, including a team of engineering students at the University of Calgary.
The purpose of it is to make conversions from ICE vehicles into EVs more affordable.
That's Camilla Abdrazakov. She's a mechanical engineering student at the University of Calgary, and she's captain of Team Relectric.
And we're also developing our own technologies that are open source, which means that anyone would be able to access it.
Camilla says the most expensive thing about conversions is the cost of components.
Batteries are expensive, electric motors are expensive, integrating power electronics is also expensive, and then you need to make sure that the car goes through a lot of tests to make sure that everything is safe.
On that note, before you dive into a car conversion, you'll want to check with your insurer. When it comes to cost, Camilla, who did 2 internships at Tesla last year, says things are changing fast.
I'm pretty hopeful because I think technology is just improving really, really quickly. And so when that happens, all the equipment becomes more affordable, and then the feasibility of having EV conversions is likely to increase.
Sloan and Tom with Arc Motor Company agree. They predict there will be more companies popping up making parts and equipment for EVs, and that will help with affordability. And they've come up with an idea that could scale up their efforts. They've been meeting with municipal governments looking to green their fleets of working vehicles.
Right now, we're mainly focusing on the standard white pickup trucks that every city has running around, but it can be delivery vans or work vans. We're also looking at technology and converting much larger vehicles like dump trucks or snow plows, those things.
Sloan thinks governments could encourage more people to convert their cars by offering incentives. For example, a bill making its way through the California State Senate would give people up to $2,000 towards the cost of making their gas-powered cars zero emissions. Some major car manufacturers are now making kits to convert their own cars to electric, but I couldn't find those easy options online for my Honda Fit or Sharon's Subaru. So for now, it looks like we'll be driving our old beaters into the ground. For CBC Radio, I'm Rachel Sanders.
That's super interesting, isn't it? I bet we're going to see, I think, that tech in our lifetime come to fruition because surely all those gas-powered vehicles aren't going to go by the wayside. That is an item that came from CBC's What on Earth. If you want to hear that show, it airs later today at 2 o'clock on CBC Radio 1. Or, of course, you can just check out the podcast anytime, wherever you get your podcasts. You're listening to Information Radio. Still ahead on Business News, how Facebook's parent company is going to address AI-generated images. Speaking of things getting more sophisticated, we'll have that conversation now with Crystalie Ramlakan right after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is 1 degree. We start the day with fog in February. We end the day with February showers. Today's high is 2. The city of Winnipeg is making tough decisions as it prepares to release its 2024 budget today. Mayor Scott Gillingham has already committed to keeping the property tax increase to 3.5%. But Finance Chair Jeff Brawadi says the city is still struggling to keep up with rising costs.
We did ask departments to get out their pencils and figure out every opportunity to minimize the impact of inflation. And, try to minimize any impact that it would have on the delivery of services to Winnipeggers.
Brawadi says there are many things driving up costs, including labor, fuel, and construction materials. He says Winnipeggers shouldn't expect any major funding announcements for projects like widening of Kenaston Boulevard. The budget will be released at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Some northern Manitoba communities face a potential winter season with no ice road. Keewatin Tribal Council Grand Chief Walter Westesakut, federal and provincial governments, and other leaders met yesterday to try to come up with a plan. Westesakut says no matter what, affected First Nations will get their essential supplies. He also says they talked about what to do if ice roads continue to be unreliable because of climate change.
We've continued to press the need for the all-season roads into our communities. The winter road seasons, as climate change occurs, like it's happening today, it's not feasible. It's going to cost in more ways than one for our people.
Westesakut says northern communities will continue pushing all levels of government for all-season roads. Peguis First Nation has hired new lawyers to fight a $172 million lawsuit over outstanding loans. CBC reporter Bartley Kivas now on the financial stress at Manitoba's most populous First Nation.
Peguis First Nation has almost 12,000 members on and off reserve. That's big for a First Nation, but not so big to easily handle a $172 million legal claim against it. Stan Bird has served as chief of Peguis for the past 10 months.
We need to move out from under this position that we're in. And it's almost like we're in a position where we can't do much until a BFI is cleared up.
BFI is Bridging Finance, Inc., a company that lent Peguis money at prime plus 11% interest. Bridging is now insolvent. A court-appointed receiver for the company sued Peguis in December 2022 for the principal and interest on the loans. In a statement of defense filed in September of last year, Peguis said the loans were illegal, unconscionable, and part of a Ponzi scheme. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A person was taken to hospital after a fire in a 3-story downtown apartment building. Crews arrived to smoke in that building in the 200 block of Broadway around 5:30 yesterday afternoon. Crews helped one person out of the building. That person now is in stable condition. Everyone else made it out on their own. Damage was mostly contained to one suite. Fire officials say the fire was caused by improper disposal of smoking materials. A man in Nigeria is facing charges connected to the death of a 14-year-old boy in Canada. RCMP in Surrey, BC say the teen killed himself after he was extorted online over naked images he had shared with a stranger. You can hear more on this story and other national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. A unique piece of Manitoba wetland is now in the hands of the Nature Conservancy of Canada. It has acquired a 78-hectare piece of land just east of St. Rita, that's east of Enola. The property was donated to the Conservancy by the Rosenberg family of Winnipeg. It's made up of wetland and highly sought-after peatland. Area manager Tim Teethart says it is part of the Conservancy's efforts to save wetlands and peatlands.
Wetlands are one of those kind of habitats that we are losing. It's estimated within Canada that we've lost about 70% of wetlands in the southern portion of the country, kind of where the majority of the population lives.
Teetert says peatland has the ability to hold in and store a vast amount of moisture, increasingly important, he says, with the frequency of severe weather events. Well, the Winnipeg Jets have now lost their 4th straight game, the longest winless skid of the season. The first game after the All-Star break saw the Jets lose 3-0 in Pittsburgh last night. It was a night when Mark Scheifele returned to the lineup, and Sean Monahan suited up for the first time as a Jet. Jets head coach Rick Bowness.
The similarity in the 4 games right now is our inability to score. We're not getting outworked. We're not getting outplayed. We're just not scoring right now. The offense is a little bit out of sync. Mark needs a couple of games. Sean needs a couple of games. We're going to be fine. We'll be all right.
The Jets' Brendan Dillon was given a game misconduct after an illegal check to the head of Noel Arciari. The Jets get a rematch, though. They will try to best the Penguins in Winnipeg on Saturday. But first, Winnipeg faces the Flyers tomorrow night in Philadelphia. You can find more news updated at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
And now with our regional forecast, here's Abby Adiemi.
Thank you, Mercy. Currently, Winnipeg, we are at 1 degree with those persistent cloud away. And of course, the fog is kind of lifting, but you need to keep your headlights on for safety. We're heading to a high of 2 degrees. Brandon is misty. It's at 0. You have a risk of freezing drizzle. And then light snow later in the afternoon. We see a high of 0. Thompson, good morning. You are currently at -18. You're heading to a high of -13. Churchill is currently clear at minus 33. Later, it's going to be mainly sunny, and then you'll be seeing a high of minus 20. Gimli is currently at 0, heading to a high of 1 degree. Duffin is at minus 4, heading to a high of minus 1. Steinbach and Morris and the rest of the Pembina Valley region both at 0, and we'll be seeing that fog there with 0 visibility. And talking about fog, there's a fog advisory in effect for several areas in southern Manitoba that affects the Pembina Valley, the Red River Valley, Winnipeg, and parts of the Interlake, the White Shell, and southeast of Manitoba, which might be affecting your commute this morning. And with that, I'll just connect with Corey to find out what the conditions actually look like.
Yeah, so far I haven't got any calls yet on the commuter line directly about the fog, but I'm looking at Manitoba 511 right now, and it's showing most of that poor visibility is being reported in the Interlake area between Toulon, Arberg, Ericsdale area, Lundar. Those highways there seeing some poor visibility as well. Western Manitoba, Minnedosa, Neepawa, McCreary area around there. So that seems to be where the most of the poor visibility is this morning. But I'd love to get updates from folks about what you're seeing out there. Here in the city, one issue to keep an eye out for at Abinogi-Mikana, there's a construction zone causing some issues from Pembina to River. That's eastbound Abinogi-Mikana from Pembina to River. The curb and middle lane are closed for sewer work until February 19th. So that's going to mean pretty significant delays for quite a while. So keep that in mind. It is going to be a problem for your commute for the next, next week, 2 weeks or so. So look out for that. If you see anything else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. Whether you're walking, biking, driving, careful on the sidewalks. They're very, very, very slippery right now. 204-788-3093.
Corey, let's talk for a second about the draft budget coming out today.
Sure.
They'll still have to vote on it then, but we're going to see this document. Part of it was leaked by Councillor Russ Wyatt to some media, including CBC. So we talked to the mayor about that when we were on site at the pool, Concordia Pool, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, he came by, and we really focused on services and recreation and the tough decisions that council's going to have to make in this week.
Absolutely. Tough is the right word. So I said Concordia Pool. That's old school. Elmwood East Kildonan Pool. But we were there last month on live. And most of that show was focused on recreation and people talking about why that matters to them and worries about what might be in this document. They're planning for 3 years, the city of Winnipeg is. The mayor, Scott Gillingham, joined us last month. But in advance now of us getting our first look at this officially later today, we're asking on Facebook about it. So as the city of Winnipeg draft budget's coming out later today, we know a 3.5% property tax increase, for example, is one of the things expected. So how does that sit with you, we're asking? And then also, what do you hope will and won't be in the budget today? So we'll take calls on this, I think, today.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Give us a call on our listener line, 204-788-3205.
Yeah, 788-3205. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
And we'll get those calls on through the program if you reach out to us. Right now, staying with financial news, let's talk all things business with Crystalie Ramlakan, who joins us via Zoom. Good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, Marcy.
So we begin actually with AI-generated images. A lot of talk right now about how realistic they are. How is Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, trying to address that?
Well, the company says users must now label AI-generated audio and video, or they could be penalized. So Meta says it's confident technology companies can detect AI-generated images pretty reliably at this point, but says the technology for audio and video is not quite there yet. So the company wants to create a sense of momentum and incentive for the rest of the industry to follow as well. And so for now, it's going to require people to label their own altered content. And it hasn't come out yet with the, details on the penalties that it might put forward. Some experts say maybe people could get banned from the platforms, which wouldn't be very good for people who rely on them. So for more on this, we spoke to Ritesh Kotak, who is a cybersecurity technology analyst. He says, as Meta's technology for detecting AI improves, so will AI's ability to deceive the technology.
This is something that's caught the world by storm. There's a lot of good that comes from artificial intelligence and generative AI, but with the good, there also comes the bad and in some cases the evil. So we got to figure out a way to leverage the good, mitigate the bad, and essentially eliminate the evil. And I think that this is a start. More needs to be done. This is going to be a work in progress. It's always going to be a game of essentially cat and mouse.
Now, Meta already labels content generated using its own AI tools, and it plans to start labeling images generated by other companies' artificial intelligence services in the coming months. And Marcy, this is just an early glimpse into an emerging system that tech companies are trying to develop to try to mitigate the potential harms associated with AI.
It's hard not to feel like it's already off the rails, right? It's like, okay.
It's true.
Let's go to another story. A number of oil companies have come up with their latest earnings reports, Christally, in the last week. How are they performing when you look at the big picture?
Well, they're showing to be fairly resilient. Energy giant BP just reported its second highest annual profit in a decade, but it is still lower than last year's record highs when soaring energy demand supercharged prices following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So strong gas trading and persistent demand for oil is helping energy companies post healthy profits recently, even though energy prices have been volatile. And these BP results are the first since the company announced its new CEO, who is Canadian. Now, the British energy company is also stepping up its plans to return cash to shareholders through buybacks. So for more on this, here's Noah Brenner, who is the executive editor for operations at Energy Intelligence. He's located in London, UK.
The capital that they're giving back to shareholders perhaps could have been put into clean energy or into some of their energy transition plans, and they've chosen to return it to shareholders. Now, certainly that's what shareholders are asking for who are investing in oil and gas companies these days. I mean, they're punishing companies that don't return a high amount of their capital back to them.
Now, BP is aiming to turn itself into an integrated energy company and to invest in more low carbon activities. However, though, the sudden departure of this strategy's architect, former boss Bernard Looney, has sparked some speculation on a change in direction, possibly. But for now, BP has shown few signs of ditching the policy.
We can go right to markets this morning. How are they looking today?
Yes. So in Europe, markets are turning lower amid growing uncertainty over the interest rate cut outlook. So Germany, the UK, and France are all down. In Asia, stocks are mostly higher as investors assess corporate earnings and China's efforts to bolster its market. Japan is down, Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is down. Oil is up 59 cents to $73.90 US per barrel. Gold is down $3.50 to $2,047.90 US per ounce. And the dollar is up almost a tenth of a cent to 74.21 cents US.
Christally Ramlakan, always lovely to see you on Zoom. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, Marcy.
Christally Ramlakan with our business news on CBC. 6:44 a.m. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is your morning show. Hopefully your morning's going well. Thanks for making us part of it. Get the rubber boots out. We're expecting rain tonight. It's foggy and it is going to be a high of 2 degrees in the city of Winnipeg today. Well, in the United Kingdom, 1 in 2 people develop some form of cancer in their lifetime. And the big news this week, King Charles III is now one of those people. Buckingham Palace says his cancer was discovered during an operation for an enlarged prostate. And while it's not clear what kind of cancer the king has, he did begin treatment on Monday. Now, analysts are already commending King Charles for his openness about this. They say it helps build awareness about detection and treatment of cancer. So we're going to extend that conversation. Dr. Christopher Labos is with us, epidemiologist and cardiologist. Good morning.
Good morning.
So in your experience, can you just reflect on how cancer, or maybe any illness for that matter, becomes a great leveler of people?
Well, I think there is something to that. It doesn't matter how much money you made in your life. It doesn't matter what kind of car you have. It doesn't matter what kind of house you live in. If you don't have your health, you don't really have anything. And I think most people do eventually realize that with time, maybe just not early enough in many situations. That being said, though, despite the fact that we often talk about cancer and disease as the great leveler, there are very significant disparities in cancer outcomes. And so if you live in a country like Canada, which has a lot of healthcare resources, you are going to do better than if you live in a country like one of the developing nations where there aren't enough resources for cancer screening and cancer treatment. But even within this country, there are disparities between people who are at the higher end of the socioeconomic spectrum and those who are at the lower end. So the more money you have, the more access to healthcare you have, the better off you are going to be. So while cancer is the great leveler, there are actually inequities in how well people do, and that's something that we're going to have to deal with in this country if we want to have a more equitable healthcare system.
And what about the data, Dr. Labos? Is that lagging behind? I know when you look at heart disease, stroke, for example, they often say that adding to the fact that people who come from lower income, maybe racialized communities are underserved in the healthcare system overall. But that's at the back end in terms of treatment. But at the front end, we don't even understand all of the populations because we don't have the data. Does that exist in cancer research as well?
It really does. And I think we've seen this systematically where if you come from a racialized or underserved community, or if you live in a more rural community, far away from the major urban centers, it is harder for you to access healthcare. Now, on average, we do better in Canada than in many other countries, but these disparities still exist. We often like to compare ourselves to the U.S., where access to healthcare is a major issue if you don't have insurance or, enough money to pay for healthcare. But even here in Canada, with our public system, these barriers to care still exist, and this is something that we are going to have to address and leverage new technology to use things like telehealth to be able to access these remote communities that are often underserved.
Many of us have been through cancer in our own worlds and families. Once the shock of diagnosis is settled, what do you understand as a doctor about the next stages of reaction and action? And what would you say to people this morning who are maybe working through that?
It's very, very hard to predict. People will often talk about the 5 stages of grief, right? This is a common thing that's talked about, that you start with denial and then you progress all the way to acceptance, and you go through, depression, anger, and all the stages. The 5 stages of grief is actually not really a valid medical or scientific concept. It was first sort of described as a general way of explaining how people experience emotions. But it's not really a firm progression. It's not as if you start at the one end and then finish at the other. You can skip stages. You can repeat stages. You can go through them in any order. There's no real rule book for how people experience grief or shock or a new diagnosis like this. So honestly, the best thing you could do is really just listen and realize that everybody's different, and what's true for one person is not going to be true for somebody else. And what might be helpful for one person is going to be seen as an intrusion by another person.
Just before you leave us this morning, I kind of like the way you framed this. I understand you look at treating cancer as like a full-time job, even from the patient's perspective, right?
It really is. And there is so much that has to go into it in terms of organizing visits, making sure you get your tests before you see the next specialist. And that's where really a lot of people can become helpful, because some people are very, very detail-oriented and like to have control over this. But some people are just very overwhelmed by this whole process and really need somebody to help them navigate the healthcare system. And, that's where it really depends. Listen to what the other person needs. Sometimes just driving them to the appointment so they don't have to worry about parking makes a huge difference. So that's where you can be most helpful if you have a friend or a family member that is suffering from cancer.
Thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. You take care.
That is Dr. Christopher Labos, epidemiologist and cardiologist, talking about cancer overall with the backdrop of King Charles III this week, the Buckingham Palace disclosing that he does have cancer. It is right now 10 to 7. Let's stay actually with medical news, because if you're a regular listener, then you know that Dr. Bardwaj is up next with our medical column. And we're switching gears to something here that might be affecting your family. It's also common. Canadians right now facing long wait times in emergency rooms across the country. Now, that includes here in Winnipeg. But there's this social media trend that claims it can help parents avoid a visit to emergency, specifically if they're worried that their kid might have appendicitis. And that's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about common things, appendicitis. Now, this test that people are on to is called a jump test to diagnose appendicitis. It's all over social media, and it's a real thing. But House Dr. Raj Bardwaj says that it should not be the only deciding factor about whether or not you're going to seek medical attention. And that is today's medical column.
Good morning, Marcy.
So if we back up just for a moment before we learn what this jump test is, what does the appendix actually do other than, give people appendicitis?
Right? It seems like an ornery little guy. So your appendix is basically a small pouch of intestine about the size of your pinky finger. It lives on the right lower side of your gut, and it's attached to the wall of your large intestine like a little closet off of a big hallway. So for a long time, people figured that it used to be a bigger structure, but it sort of shriveled down to this so-called vestigial organ because it wasn't needed as humans evolved. But a lot of scientists think that it actually does have important functions. We're just figuring out the details. So one theory is that the appendix functions like a little protected pocket of gut bacteria that can repopulate your gut with good bacteria if your normal bacteria get wiped out by like an intense gut infection, that gives you diarrhea or something. Another theory is that your appendix is part of your immune system, an important part. So remember, one of the most important jobs of your immune system is to scan for cancer cells and destroy them. Well, it turns out that there's an increased risk of colon cancer in people who've had appendicitis, about a 3% risk in people who've had appendicitis versus about a 0.1% risk in people who haven't. And there's debate about, is that related to an immune system cause, or is that an effect, or is that just a correlation? So, obviously people can live without an appendix, though. So we still have work to do to figure out the details of things like that.
Just to stay with appendicitis for a moment, is it more common in kids?
Yeah, so it's actually more common in people between about 10 years old and 30 years old. But it's harder to diagnose in kids, I think. So that's where that idea comes from. There was a big study in Ontario that was published in 2003 that looked at 7 years worth of appendicitis cases, over 65,000 cases. They found that when you looked at 10-year age ranges, appendicitis was most common in people between 10 and 19, and then second most common in the 20 to 29-year age group, and actually still more common in people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s than in kids under 10. And they found a couple of other interesting things. They found that it's a bit more common in males than females at all ages. And a weird thing, according to this study, appendicitis was more common in the summer months. Now, they didn't go into exactly why that might be, and other smaller studies haven't found the same trends. So we still have, again, more to learn about this little organ and its function.
What do we understand about what causes appendicitis, though, and what are the symptoms?
Yeah, so it's often caused by an infection of some sort. So it's caused, and it can be caused by blockage of the appendix as well. But regardless, it starts getting inflamed, it gets infected, and as it gets more inflamed and infected, it starts to cause these sort of textbook symptoms and signs. So it starts generally with, you're just feeling off. You got a bit of a stomach ache, maybe some nausea, some fever, some lack of appetite. And then as it gets worse, then the pain goes from everywhere in your belly and it migrates. The pain sort of localizes to your right lower side of your belly where the appendix lives. And then as it gets even worse, the appendix can rupture. And it can leak bowel contents and bacteria into your entire abdomen. And that leads to inflammation of the entire lining of your abdominal cavity. We call that peritonitis. And that causes even more pain. You got pain all over your belly again. You get more fever. You can even get shocky where, your blood pressure drops to dangerously low levels. And it seems like, well, this is an easy pattern to pick up. Diagnosing appendicitis should be easy. Problem is that the appendix doesn't read the textbook. So it makes it hard to diagnose, especially in kids who sometimes don't get the same key symptoms. A lot of kids will have appendicitis and not have a lack of appetite, for example.
Now let's get to this jump test. What is the jump test for diagnosing appendicitis?
Yeah, so it's this test that got popular over the last few weeks over social media as a way to help to either diagnose or rule out appendicitis. So the idea is that you get your child, or if it's you get you to jump up like you're trying to touch the ceiling. So you jump straight up, and then when you land, if it causes a lot of belly pain, either all over your belly or just that right lower side, that's a positive jump test. And there have been studies done on the jump test which say that it's about 70% predictive that there is some peritonitis with a positive test. Okay, and in the case of a negative jump test, it's about 90% predictive that there's no peritonitis, which sounds great. But again, there's a lot of caveats, right? Appendicitis doesn't always cause peritonitis. Other things can cause peritonitis or belly pain as well that might give you a positive jump test. Things that might be totally benign, so viral infection, constipation in young kids, more serious things like bowel obstructions. So we can't just rely on one test. So I tell my patients and their parents that, peritonitis is part of the assessment for sure, but we need to zoom out and we need to look at the whole story and the whole person. Are they feverish? How's their appetite? Have they been peeing and pooping normally? Is their pain controllable with simple things like Tylenol or Advil? What did the pain start like? Has it evolved from that sort of all over belly to the right lower side? All of those factors help to make the diagnosis, as well as tests, blood tests that show increased infection fighting cells, ultrasound imaging, or sometimes even CT scans to go looking for the appendix. We try to avoid CT scans in younger people, though, because of the radiation exposure. But it's more than just sort of, getting somebody to jump and then saying, oh, well, you must have appendicitis or you must not have appendicitis. That would be a risky thing to sort of hang your hat on.
Is the treatment for appendicitis always surgery?
Traditionally, yeah. You got appendicitis, your appendix is coming out. But, surgery has its risks. So lately, there's been more and more research into treating uncomplicated early appendicitis with just antibiotics. And that seems to work, but there's about a 40% chance that a person who has appendicitis and doesn't get their appendix removed, gets treated with antibiotics, will have appendicitis again within a year, and then it will need to be removed.
All right, Dr. Bardwaj, thank you.
My pleasure.
That's our medical column with Dr. Raj Bardwaj. Heather Wells is in at 3 minutes to 7 with our headlines now.
Good morning. Well, Peguis First Nation has hired new lawyers to fight a legal claim over outstanding loans. A company called Bridging Finance, also known as BFI, lent Peguis some money at prime plus 11%. That company is now insolvent. A court-appointed receiver for BFI sued Peguis in 2022 for $172 million. We're going to hear the latest on this case. And a unique piece of Manitoba wetland is now in the hands of Nature Conservancy Canada. It has acquired a 78 piece of hectare land just east of St. Rita, which is east of Anola, and the property is made up of wetland and highly sought after peatland. We'll hear more in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
In the forecast, 1 degree in Winnipeg. Today will be around 2 for daytime high. Winds will be northeast at 20 to 40, and we are the warm spot right now in the province. Now, we do have a fog advisory for Winnipeg, Red River Valleys, Pembina and Interlake as well, and southeast Manitoba. And to check how that is affecting or not affecting the commute this morning, Corey Funkson.
Maria called. She drives from Lorette down to the south perimeter to Port Prairie. She says she's seen no fog so far, so that's good news from her. Ben also called the commuter line northbound Main at York. There's 2 trucks in the far left lane that are stopped right now, so keep right to get around that. It's catching some folks off guard, so look out for that. Give me a call if you have any other updates, 204-788-3093.
Thanks, Corey. Just when you thought it was sold out, we have 2 pairs of tickets to see the Current live in Winnipeg next week. We'll talk to Matt Galloway next hour. Also, a conversation about why there are so few black high school coaches in Canada. There's an event happening tonight to discuss that at Sport Manitoba. We have a coach that'll be in studio. And reaction to the nursing student who was here yesterday in studio, posting an open letter on social media highlighting the challenges that student nurses are facing. The union is on in the next hour. Stay with us.
On The Current.
Rents are also climbing in Montreal. Politicians, landlords, and housing advocates have been meeting to look at how to fix the problem.
A program in Montreal is making sure people who are struggling to pay rent don't end up homeless by giving them cash. It is a straightforward solution, but it's helped hundreds of people keep their homes. I'll tell you their story coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report.
Good morning.
Pakistan explosions have killed 26 people outside the offices of 2 political parties. A pickup truck full of injured people speeds through the gate of a hospital near one of the bombing sites. The attacks come on the eve of Pakistan's parliamentary election. They are the latest in a campaign marked by violence and harassment. Much of it is directed at Imran Khan and his party. The former prime minister is having a major influence on the vote, despite the fact that he's in jail. Salima Shivji has more from Islamabad.
At a small gathering days before the election, Imran Khan supporters rally, calling for everyone to vote for the former prime minister. Khan is not here. He's in jail, barred from running in this election. And his party, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, has been the target of a crackdown. what they say is orchestrated by the military to sideline them, a charge the army denies. Shoaib Shaheen is still openly campaigning, but many of his fellow PTI politicians are in hiding.
There is a hindrance on behalf of the police, on behalf of the administration. The police is harassing our supporters, and sometimes they are stopping their businesses.
Observers say this is the least credible election in years, in a country that has seen its fair share of vote-rigging accusations. The man widely expected to win Thursday's vote is Nawaz Sharif, a three-time prime minister looking for a fourth mandate, as he works the crowd. Sharif was previously barred from contesting another election in 2017 and convicted of corruption, but those rulings have been overturned. His path to power cleared by an alleged backroom deal with Pakistan's army generals. For many here, even those attending political rallies, the voting process offers little hope. I have no faith in this country. We need brand new politicians, says 23-year-old Palwasha Afaq. There are no fair elections here. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Islamabad.
In the U.S. House of Representatives, the Republicans are showing signs of division in their ranks. A vote to impeach the U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas failed overnight. It was meant to punish the Biden administration for its handling of the U.S.-Mexico border, but 3 Republicans voted against it, breaking rank with their party. Tom McClintock was one of them.
It lowers the grounds of impeachment to a point where we can expect it to be leveled against every conservative Supreme Court justice, every future Republican president and cabinet member the moment the Democrats take control.
Another vote could be held as early as today. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is meeting with Israeli leaders in Jerusalem. They are reviewing the response by Hamas to the latest ceasefire proposal. That tentative agreement was drawn up last week by the U.S., Israel, Qatar, and Egypt. As Abby Kodasan reports, Hamas has some detailed demands.
A 4.5-month truce followed by an end to the war. That is the demand in Hamas's response to the U.S.-backed proposal sent by mediators last week. Reuters news agency has seen the Hamas counterproposal and is reporting the militant group wants to see 3 stages, each lasting 45 days. Phase 1 would see the release of more hostages, all Israeli women and males under the age of 19, along with the elderly and sick. It would also mean the release of Palestinian women and children held in Israeli jails. All remaining Israeli male hostages would be released in the second phase. The final stage would see the exchange of the bodies and remains of those who've been killed in the fighting. The Hamas response also calls for more aid, including food and other necessities. In recent days, the United Nations has said famine is imminent for the more than 2 million Palestinians living in Gaza. And the aid that they do have isn't always getting to people who need it. The UN Agency for Palestine Refugees said on Tuesday that a humanitarian convoy carrying food to people in northern Gaza was hit by Israeli forces. Hamas also wants to see all IDF troops withdraw from Gaza. The militant group's response is already in the hands of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He has previously said the war will continue until all the hostages are released and Israel's security is never threatened again. Abby Kwadasan, CBC News, London.
A man in Nigeria is facing charges related to the death of a 14-year-old boy here in Canada. RCMP in Surrey, BC say the teen died by suicide. He'd been extorted online after he shared intimate images with a stranger. Yvette Brand has the story.
A promising hockey player with lots of friends, so says Chris Beach, who coached the 14-year-old who CBC is not naming.
Worked hard, listened, was coachable, and from what I understand, a phenomenal student as well. So again, just a kid you want in your community.
The boy's loved ones were devastated by his sudden death last year. RCMP say he'd been lured into sharing images online and then faced threats and extortion. Surrey RCMP Sergeant Tammy Lobb.
It was only minutes, but the impact that these threats and the extortion itself, like I said, that threat to share these images can have, devastating impacts such as self-harm or even suicide.
The RCMP's Serious Crimes Unit went to Nigeria and worked with the FBI to find suspects. A 26-year-old man is now awaiting trial there on charges of distributing child pornography, attempts at extortion by threats, money laundering, and having the proceeds of an unlawful act. Cases like this are on the rise. That's according to Stephen Sauer with the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. He says their cyber tip line gets 10 teen calls a day.
We are seeing an ever-increasing number of these coming in.
RCMP say sextortion cases have nearly doubled in recent years. Often the targets are young men. Police want to get the message out to teens that authorities are waiting to help, and it's not their fault. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
The issue of electoral reform returns to the House of Commons today. The NDP is bringing forward a motion. It calls on the government to assemble a nonpartisan group of Canadians. They would be tasked with recommending whether our electoral system needs to change. New Democrat MP Lisa Marie Barron is bringing the motion forward.
We know the first past the post system was implemented in Confederation in the 1800s, and now we know that a lot has changed since then. It's not representative of our communities.
20 MPs, including some Liberals, have endorsed the motion, but so far it is not finding much support among Conservatives. Cameron Ortis will be sentenced later today in Ottawa. The former RCMP intelligence official has been found guilty of leaking secret information to police targets. The Crown says for that, he should spend nearly 30 years behind bars. The CBC's Catherine Tunney has been following this trial. She joins me from Ottawa. Kat, why do prosecutors say this is the appropriate sentence?
You know, from the Crown's perspective, this is a man who betrayed the RCMP, betrayed Canada's allies, and jeopardized the safety of Canadians. And that's why they're asking for a consecutive 28-year sentence. Now, one of the Crown's main arguments is that by leaking information to police targets, Cameron Ortis put Canada's relationship with its Five Eyes allies at risk. A sharing alliance that Canada depends on, sometimes for life-saving information. So, at the sentencing hearing last month, Crown Prosecutor Judy Cleaver argued that if Cameron Ortis does not face significant consequences, then, Canada's promise to those partners rings hollow.
What is the defense arguing?
The defense told the judge that, Ortis has already endured hardships leading up to this point. He was in custody for 3 years waiting for a trial to start, a third of which was served in solitary confinement. We heard from his lawyers, he's lost his job, he's lost his friends, he's exhausted his savings, and he's been debanked, which means that, Canadian banks won't let him open an account. And that's why they've argued he shouldn't have to serve another day behind bars, essentially that his time served should be his sentence. And the exact quote coming from his defense lawyer, John Duty, was, "No inmate has had to suffer what Mr. Ortis suffered." Now, Justice Robert Moranger has been balancing both sides, and he'll hand down his decision later this morning.
Thank you, Kat.
Thank you.
The CBC's Catherine Tunney in Ottawa. Snoop Dogg and Master P are longtime collaborators.
What you gonna do when we come for you? If you a dog, you better not run. What you gonna do when we come to you?
And they don't just make music together. They also own a fledgling cereal brand. It's called Snoop Cereal. But the rappers say Walmart and Post Consumer Goods conspired to keep their product off the shelves. Now Snoop and Master P are suing those companies. Their lawsuit claims their cereal was falsely labeled as being sold out, but there were plenty of boxes hidden in the stockroom.
Let's keep it real. Keep your eyes on your enemies, cause some kill.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
From the street, know what I'm talking about. Never bite the hand that feeds you, cause you never know when your dog might need.
Well, welcome to the middle of the week, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Good morning. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg. You're with CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your morning. Going to be a mild one again, very foggy, and we'll have the commute and weather updated in a moment for you. This hour on the program, understanding why there are so few black high school coaches across Canada is one of the topics of discussion tonight in Winnipeg. There's a panel discussion at Sport Manitoba going on. We're going to have one of the panelists in studio with us. Also, just when you thought it was sold out, we do have 2 pairs of tickets to see The Current live in Winnipeg next week. Stay tuned. We're going to hear a conversation with host Matt Galloway about what they're planning and how they're going to highlight our city. And at 10 to 8, a follow on a story we had yesterday. A nursing student shared in studio with us yesterday an open letter that they had on social media highlighting the challenges that local students are facing in nursing. We're going to get the union to respond this morning. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who's in our news department with more. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, it is budget day for the city of Winnipeg. Mayor Scott Gillingham has committed to keeping the property tax increase to 3.5% over his term. But one expert warns that's not going to be enough to maintain services amid rising costs. We'll hear more. And some Manitoba communities in the north face a potential winter season with no ice road. Keewatin Tribal Council Grand Chief Walter Wostestakut, federal and provincial governments and other leaders all met yesterday to try to come up with a plan. Wostestakut says no matter what, affected communities will get their essential supplies. We're going to hear more from him, as well as other news from Manitoba coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Into the forecast we go with Abby Adeyemi, who I'm guessing is about to talk a lot about fog, right?
Yes, I am. But as of now, we are at 1 degrees in the city of Winnipeg. Those clouds we're seeing is still going to stay with us. The fog, actually, I looked out the window right now. It's kind of lifting, but you still need to keep your headlights on for safety. Now, as we continue through the day, the clouds will stay with us. The wind will be coming from the northeast, and we're expecting a high of 2 degrees. And talking about the fog advisory is still in effect for several parts of southern Manitoba. And the affected areas include the Pembina Valley region, the Red River Valley region, Winnipeg, parts of the Interlake, the White Shell, and South East Manitoba. This will definitely be bringing near zero visibility in this foggy period, and it's I would advise you that travel could be a bit tricky, so it's going to be reducing your visibility, and drivers just need to take extra caution because visibility might just suddenly drop, so you might want to take it easy on the road. If you find yourself driving in these conditions, I'll just say slow down, keep an eye on for tail light ahead, and be prepared to stop. Safety first, Manitoba. Safety first. Right now, Winnipeg is at 1 degree.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey, you were busy on the phones just before 7 o'clock in World Report with some issues on the highways.
Yeah, I got a call from Maria. Actually, she had some good news, I'll say. There is this fog advisory in effect, but she said her commute takes her from Lorette through down the south perimeter and then up to Portage Prairie. And she said she hadn't seen any fog from Lorette through the south perimeter. So by the time she gets to Portage, she said she'll give me another call to see if there's fog there. But so far, things are actually looking pretty clear. In the city, actually, is where it seems to be most of the problems are this morning. Ben called northbound Main at York. There's 2 trucks parked, stopped in the far left lane. So keep right to get around that. That is catching some folks off guard. So keep right if you're heading northbound Main towards York. And finally, just a reminder, there's a construction zone at Abinogi-Mikina from eastbound Abinogi-Mikina from Pembina to River. That's actually going to be doing sewer work there until February 19th. Now, it's been causing some pretty big delays for folks this past week so far. And that's going to be an issue now until February 19th. So just keep an eye out for that if that is part of your commute. You may want to find another way if you can. Then that's the curb lane and middle lane are closed for sewer work eastbound Abinogi-Mikina between Pembina and River. If you see anything else going on out there on the roads, on the highways, the bike lanes, those slippery sidewalks, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, you ready, radio audience and YouTube audience? It's not every day we get to attempt live sound effects. We can do this, Stephen. We can do it. And then I'll introduce you. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I almost hit the mic. Okay.
Close.
Can you make out what this is? Okay. I'm trying to catch the ball really fast. It's a basketball. Yeah. Thank you for slapping it.
Okay.
This guest of mine here knows a lot about not only passing the ball. All right, I'm ready. But also teaching people how to pass the ball. How long have you been coaching?
I've been coaching. It's been more than 25 years.
Yeah.
But honestly...
Woo! We hit the computer. It's okay.
Because I really love it.
Yeah.
I honestly, the years, I don't know.
Yeah. More than 25 years with Sturgeon Heights Huskies. So
That's right.
Go, go, go. Stephen Tacky is my guest this morning, and we're passing the ball, and at the end there poorly, but before that, pretty good. Because Stephen's part of a panel tonight. They're going to be talking about why there's a lack of diversity in high school sport in Canada. It's part of this conversation, and tonight they're focusing on coaches like Stephen. So it's happening over at Sport Manitoba Building on Pacific in the at the Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame Gallery. And beyond coaching the Huskies at Sturgeon Heights, Stephen's also coached at the provincial level and been awarded for his work. So what do you love about it, about, imparting knowledge to the kids through coaching, Stephen?
Because every year you get a new group of people that you get to interact with, share with. I think I just love helping to inspire, helping to have kids grow, help kids experience new things. So as much as there's the basketball part, really I learned a long time ago that it is the whole person that you get a chance to experience, because you're going to see them later on, or they will talk to a friend later on, and how do they feel when they were part of your basketball team and when they're around you? So I really enjoy that kind of stuff.
And it's interesting because I think these discussions, people often think, well, it's a sports discussion. And I always say to having been someone who's been lifelong involved in sports, I played volleyball, still do, and I'm about to turn 50. And I mean, I know what it's given my life.
Yeah.
Coaching is such an important thing as you're going through. I mean, you're learning how to deal with your emotions. You're learning how to deal with loss. You're learning how to deal with victory, interaction, all of it. What was your path to becoming a high school coach then?
Well, when I graduated, I didn't coach right away, but I still loved basketball. I played basketball at recreationally, and I remember I went back to go watch my old school play, and in those times the junior varsity team would play, and then the varsity team would play, and I remember watching it, and at that point we had another different junior varsity coach, and it seemed like year after year after year there was a different coach, and that's frequent in high school basketball. So when I was in school, I'm not trying to flex on this program, but I was the school president. Again, it was my school, and I had passion for my school. I wanted things to go well. So I still had that love for my school. Fast forward, I'm watching coaches just kind of revolve, and I remember saying, you know what, I'm going to coach. I don't want my school to have a revolving door of coaches. I want there to be a really, really good basketball team. And I asked the teacher supervisor, Ron Pasechnik, and he said yes. So I spoke to two friends.
And off you went.
And that's where we went.
So your path was to connect to community school. You were already a player at basketball, but obviously the discussion tonight is looking at getting more coaches involved who represent. So what do we mean when we say there's a lack of diversity in high school coaching? Who is not represented?
It's funny you say that, because I've been thinking that too. Because diversity could mean so many different things. It could mean, are there men, women? Are there they, them? Are there different physical abilities? Like, it could mean so many things. So I'm excited about this panel discussion because I'm curious to hear what some of the other panelists have to say.
And what's your sense as a coach? Are we lacking in all of those areas of diversity?
I do think so. I think culturally, sports and coaching has been a male thing. And maybe it's because gym class, and there's usually a male teacher or a female teacher, but it's generally been a male thing. And I'm not exactly sure why. I think that's more culturally and historically.
So we're lacking in gender diversity.
I think that's absolutely there for sure.
Yep. Yeah. We're also lacking when you look across the country in terms of racial diversity. I mean, there's fewer Black high school coaches across Canada.
Yes.
So how would you like to change that, or what would you like to say about the value it's about getting into coaching? Or I guess I should ask, how do you think we should solve it?
Many times I remember saying, like, where's everybody at? Like, all those people that I played basketball with on the playground and all that kind of stuff. Where are you? Like, how come they didn't get into coaching? Because I know they love the game. And I don't know those answers, but I do know that there are some things within the high school system that makes it difficult for people to get in. And one of the main things, it has to do with being a teacher. So the more teachers we have of a diverse group, in this case we're talking racially, I think that is one of the things that would change things. But then I also think it's culturally. There are some cultures that, they're moving in a certain direction, and they're not moving in the direction of coaching.
What direction are they moving in? Can you articulate that?
Maybe professionally, they want to be this. They want to be a nurse. They want to be a doctor. They want to be a lawyer, something.
So you're seeing representation rates culturally go for people maybe go up in different areas, but not necessarily in teaching.
That's
coaching.
right, because that profession in that culture is not a profession that might be a common profession that they're looking for.
Got it.
And so because in high school, generally being a teacher is an important thing, it just makes it a lot easier. Now, fast forward, you look in the classroom, and if there isn't that kind of representation in the building, then it's going to reflect in the sports teams.
Okay, so this is not to insult teachers, but I think what you're saying is in some cultures, the teaching profession could be seen as something not to pursue. In maybe you're going to pursue, perhaps, I'm going to use stereotypes here, doctor, lawyer.
Yeah.
That's the sensibility you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that's a piece of it. I wouldn't say that's the whole thing, but I think that's an important piece.
What do you feel needs to happen to attract more high school coaches, especially those who aren't white? Just to be blunt here, I mean, do we have to have a pathway for people to enter coaching, even if they're not entering education? Like, is that something?
Well, I know that schools are starving for coaches. Schools are always starving for coaches. Like, anybody can come and say they want to be a coach. Schools need coaches. So and that's why I'm interested in hearing what my panelists have to say, because I don't necessarily know that it is, somebody says, hey, you know what, I'd like to coach this soccer team, this basketball team. And the school says, well, you're black or you're Filipino or you're whatever. So no, I don't know if that happens. And if that happens, that's just because that's a bad person. But in terms of a pathway, I think that it's important that we make it smooth and easy. And it's getting harder and harder to be a high school coach because of all of these other things that you need to do to be a coach.
Got it.
And some people just don't have that time in their lives.
So why is it important to have diversity represented in coaching?
I think it's important equally as it is important that elementary school kids have diversity, that we know that large percentage of elementary school teachers are female. Well, that means both the males and females don't get a chance to have to see somebody else. And so equally, I think it's important just because it reflects our society. It reflects and gives kids an opportunity just to see people. And because, like you said, coaching is so important for building character, you get a chance to see that it doesn't matter what type of person it is, they can make an impact on my life.
What's the reality if somebody's listening and they think, I might have the time and the skill set, both athletically and also maybe within yourself to guide the kids, to coach, and they want to get involved at a school? Like, can you actually approach school?
Yes. If you have a sport that you're passionate about and you love it, the only reason why the sport wouldn't go in high school or middle school or elementary school is because there isn't somebody there that can champion it. So approaching a high school, it could be the school that your child or your nephew goes to, or the school that's just in the neighborhood. It could be the school you went to. If you're not from here, you love the sport, you can say, hey, I'm just wondering. You can also approach MHSAA, Manitoba High School Athletic Association, and they definitely, I know, for example, I love basketball. On the Basketball Manitoba site, they would say schools needing coaches. And there'd be a webpage of the schools that need coaches and the level. And then you just contact the school. Yeah.
Good discussion. I know this panel is going to be have a lot more tonight. The actual title of the event is Reimagining Canadian High School Sports Coaching Through a Social Justice Lens. So it's going to be super interesting. Thank you for coming in today.
Oh, thank you. I apologize for turning the ball over.
I was going to say, you got to represent before you go here. There, ready?
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Did we win?
We always win. As long as we love the game, we always win. So I just wanted to say, honestly, thank you for having me in. But me just as a reflection of coaches that are in Manitoba.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. It's a good discussion, important one. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
So in studio with me, Stephen Tacky, a Winnipeg High School basketball coach, also has coached at the provincial levels as well and been awarded for his work in our community. He is a panelist in a discussion tonight. It's about the lack of diversity in high school sport, specifically looking at coaches tonight. So as I mentioned before, it's at the Sport Manitoba building. That's over on Pacific at the Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame Gallery. Big, beautiful building if you haven't been down there. If there's still space, you do have to register first. So just check out Sport Manitoba's website.
Nothing can stop an Ironman from stepping onto the frozen river to curl. Except the weather. This warm spell means the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is being rescheduled to February 16th to 18th. Join us then for the family fun spiel we've all been waiting for. The Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, now February 16th to 18th, proudly sponsored by CBC.
7:26 a.m. is the time right now, and I want to look at our Facebook question this morning. It comes right out of the news. The City of Winnipeg draft budget is coming out later today. A 3.5% property tax increase is expected. We're asking, how does that sit with you? And what do you hope will and will not be in the budget today? So give us a call if you want, 788-3205. We'd love it if you'd weigh in. And then, of course, we will have lots of analysis of this as we get those details a little bit later this morning. Well, next on the show, it is time for Morning Sports. Scott Regehr is with us now. Good morning, Scott.
Hey there, Marcy.
So not the start to the post-All-Star break that the Winnipeg Jets wanted.
No, the Jets' losing streak stretched to 4 games last night as they were shut out by the Pittsburgh Penguins, Marcy. Special teams, once again, the bane of the Jets' existence. They weren't able to score a power play goal, so that's 5 games in a row. That's been the case, and things were not much better on the penalty kill, where Brendan Dillon was ejected for an illegal check to the head, and the Penguins scored twice on the ensuing power plays. Still, head coach Rick Bowness not sounding any alarm bells after the game.
We had enough good looks to crawl back into that game, and the similarity in the 4 games right now is our inability to score. We're not getting outworked. We're not getting outplayed. We're just not scoring right now. The offense is a little bit out of sync. Mark needs a couple of games. Sean needs a couple of games. We're going to be fine. We'll be all right.
There you are, Rick Bowness. Winnipeg back in action tomorrow night, Marcy, against the Flyers.
Tough night for the Edmonton Oilers as well, hey?
Yeah, they were looking to tie the NHL record for wins in a row at 17, held by Mario Lemieux's Penguins back in 1993. But they're trying to do it against the best in the business, the defending Cup champion Golden Knights in Las Vegas. And the Oilers had a lead, but relinquished it in the third period and fell 3-1. So no record-tying effort for them, although their veteran defender Matthias Ekholm sounded relieved.
I'm kind of happy. Don't have to talk about it anymore, but obviously you want to win every game you can, but at the same time, the closer we got to this whole record thing, I feel like the more and more talk it was about it, now it's kind of behind us. We have to start a new streak.
There you are. That is Matthias Ekholm against of the Oilers, who are playing against Anaheim in their next game coming up on Friday.
To football before you go, the Bombers have re-signed a couple of key free agents.
Should I stay or should I go now?
Nice.
Yeah, well, if we can bring the clash in, we're going to do it. That was the question concerning both of the Blue Bombers' top pending free agents, Dalton Schoen and Brady Oliveira. Oliveira coming off one of the best seasons by a Canadian running back in history that saw him nominated for the Most Outstanding Player Award, while winning the Most Outstanding Canadian honor. Schoen led the league in touchdowns while ranking 3rd in receiving yards last season. It was thought that this would leave the Bombers right up against the salary cap, and maybe they couldn't get both of those deals done. But kudos to GM Kyle Walters. Both have re-signed with the Bombers, keeping this great offense intact. Part of this comes at the expense of other players. Monday saw offensive lineman Jamarcus Hardrick reportedly sign with the Riders. That's too bad. Yesterday, it emerged defensive back Demario Houston, who led the league in interceptions with 7 last year, has agreed to terms with the Stampeders. So it's a salary cap. You can't have everybody you want, unfortunately. But boy, Brady Oliveira, who's busy in Bali right now rescuing dogs with his girlfriend, by the way, is going to be speaking with the media later on today about this new deal. And we're also going to hear from Dalton Schoen before long. Good job, Bombers.
Yeah, and Brady for the dogs. I love those videos. All right, thank you, Scott.
You betcha.
Still ahead after the news from our warm winter to William Prince and an update on Nawe Udena. The former Kapiong Barracks, the current, is going to be covering a lot of ground when it's in Winnipeg next week. We are going to hear from host Matt Galloway about their live shows coming up in the city, and we have tickets to give away. We found 2 pairs, so you have to be with us after the news. Quick note before we turn to Heather, most of the fog in the Interlake region particularly, that's what we're getting lots of calls on the commute line about, around Toulon in western Manitoba, Highway 10 through Riding Mountain, really foggy and also slippery. So thank you, Ricardo, for calling 788-3093. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's still 1 in Winnipeg. We've got that fog advisory, as you heard Marcy mention there. Near zero visibility at times in parts of southern Manitoba. The fog becomes rain tonight, which becomes snow tomorrow. A high today of 2. It is budget day for the city of Winnipeg. Mayor Scott Gillingham has committed to keeping the property tax increase to 3.5% over his term in office. But one expert warns that won't be enough to maintain services amid rising costs. Aaron Moore is a politics professor at the University of Winnipeg.
I really can't conceive of a way that a 3.5% increase is going to be adequate to just deal with basic inflationary pressures, let alone addressing and increasing any investment in new policies or priorities for the city.
Moore says the city is in a bad financial position because it froze property taxes for 14 years. Tax increases in other years have not kept up with inflation. The budget will be tabled at a meeting of the Executive Policy Committee at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Peguis First Nation has hired new lawyers to fight a $172 million lawsuit over outstanding loans. CBC reporter Bartley Kivas now on the financial stress at Manitoba's most populous First Nation.
Peguis First Nation has almost 12,000 members on and off reserve. That's big for a First Nation, but not so big to easily handle a $172 million legal claim against it. Stan Bird has served as chief of Peguis for the past 10 months.
We need to move out from under this position that we're in. And it's almost like we're in a position where we can't do much until a BFI is cleared up.
BFI is Bridging Finance, Inc., a company that lent Peguis money at prime plus 11% interest. Bridging is now insolvent. A court-appointed receiver for the company sued Peguis in December 2022 for the principal and interest on the loans. In a statement of defense filed in September of last year, Peguis said the loans were illegal, unconscionable, and part of a Ponzi scheme. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Some northern Manitoba communities face a potential winter season with no ice road. Keewatin Tribal Council Grand Chief Walter Wostesakut, federal and provincial governments, and other leaders all met yesterday to try to come up with a plan. Wostesakut says no matter what, affected First Nations will get their essential supplies. He says they also talked about what to do if ice roads continue to be unreliable because of climate change.
We continue to press the need for the all-season roads into our communities. The winter road seasons, as climate change occurs, like it's happening today, it's not feasible. It's going to cost in more ways than one for our people.
Wostesakut says northern communities will continue to push all levels of government for all-season roads. One person's in stable condition after a fire, which officials say was started by smoking. Emergency crews were called to the 200 block of Broadway at 5:30 yesterday afternoon. Everyone in that 3-story downtown apartment building made it out on their own except one person who was helped out by fire crews. That person is stable. Damage was mostly contained to one suite. Fire officials say it was caused by improper disposal of smoking materials. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is about to meet with Israeli leaders. They will discuss Hamas's response to a tentative ceasefire proposal. The militant group says it is open to freeing more hostages in return for the release of Palestinians detained by Israel. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. The Nature Conservancy of Canada is taking on another piece of property in Manitoba in its efforts to preserve wetlands. The Conservancy has acquired a 78-hectare piece of land near Anola. It's a partial of wetland and highly sought-after peatland, the same sort of peat you can buy at your local garden centre. Area manager Tim Teethart says untouched wetland is increasingly under threat in Canada, despite how it can be used to fight climate change.
That's one of those functions that wetlands play, is they're kind of that big sponge. So they will collect and store water, which helps mitigate against some severe weather events like floods and even drought events.
The Nature Conservancy looks after some 10,000 hectares of wetland in Manitoba. Well, first game after the All-Star break, and the Winnipeg Jets could not score a goal in Pittsburgh. Winnipeg loses 3-0 last night, marking the team's fourth straight loss, the longest winless skid of the season. And it happened on the debut of Sean Monahan, newly acquired center from Montreal. Jets head coach Rick Bowness liked his game.
He uses his wingers well. He makes really smart plays with the puck. He's reliable. And again, for his first game and again after a break, very happy with his game.
The Jets get a rematch. They'll try to best the Penguins in Winnipeg on Saturday. But first, Winnipeg faces the Flyers tomorrow night in Philadelphia. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells in our news department this morning. All right, Abby Adiyemi, it's regional forecast time. What you got?
We're still stuck at 1 degree in the city of Winnipeg with cloud cover and, of course, fog. We've been talking about that all morning. Expect a high of 2 degrees later on as we get into the day. Brandon is currently misty and foggy. It's stuck at 0 degrees. We're expecting the fog patches to dissipate later also, but there's light snow coming your way late afternoon and you'll be heading to a high of 0. Thompson is currently at -18, heading to a high of -13. Churchill is currently clear, but at -33, which is pretty cold, and today is going to be mainly sunny, and then you'll be seeing a high of -20. Gimli is currently at 0, heading to a high of 1 degree. Dauphin is at -4, heading to a high of -1. But look out for the light snow that you'll be getting today. Steinbach and Morris both at 0, and it's more of the fog visibility that we've been talking about, 0 to near 0 visibility because of the fog, which will also be moving off later in the day. But right now, Winnipeg is at 1.
All right. Corey Funk.
Yeah, that fog really seems to be concentrated particularly in the Interlake and Western Manitoba. Got a call from Colleen, who's driving down Highway 7 from Toulon to the perimeter. She said super foggy there. As well, Ricardo phoned, who was driving south on Highway 10 through Riding Mountain National Park. Foggy and slippery is what he said. So that seems to be where the biggest patches are. Maria, her commute takes her from Lorette down through the south perimeter to Portage La Prairie. Pretty clear all the way until you do get onto the Highway number 1 west from around Eli, between Eli and Headingley. He said there's some light fog there, but not super duper bad. So really, it does seem to be concentrated Interlake and Western Manitoba, Minnedosa, Riding Mountain, that area there. So be careful if you're on the highways in that area. Here in the city, northbound Maine at York. Heard from Ben about 45 minutes ago, so maybe it's clear. He told me there's 2 trucks stopped in the far left lane, so keep right to get around that. And finally, just one reminder for folks, I'm sure you're well aware if you've driven it so far, eastbound Abenoji-Mikana from Pembina to River, the curb lane and middle lane are closed for sewer work until February 19th. That's been causing some pretty big disruptions on folks' commute for this since Monday, since I started getting calls about it then. It's going to be a problem until February 19th, so heads up on that. If you see anything else going on out there, thanks to everyone who's called so far. Give me an update, whether you're walking, biking, driving. Would love to hear from you. That number, 204-788-3093.
Are we confusing you? Are you thinking we're an hour out? What time is it? That theme for The Current on CBC usually happens right after our show at 8:37. Well, don't be confused. It is only 21 minutes to 8 a.m. right now on your Wednesday morning. But we're playing the theme from The Current because we're getting ready for The Current to come to town. It has been a while between visits, but it will be worth the wait. The Current is here next week recording 2 shows, including a live show at the West End Cultural Center. And we're thrilled to hear about some of the guests and topics they're going to be covering on the program to highlight Winnipeg and to highlight Manitoba. Matt Galloway, of course, is the host of the show, and he recently joined me to talk about it.
Marcy, good morning. Dangerous to say that it's been worth the wait before the show even happens, but we'll let you off with that.
Yeah, you got to live up to it now. You got to live up to it. You have a really wonderful 2 shows, wonderful things planned. Why don't we go backwards? Let's start with the live show coming up on Tuesday night.
This is going to be a ton of fun. We had this idea. We often will go to places across the country because that's where the stories are. And we'll go and we'll maybe do a town hall on a specific event. But we thought, why don't we just come and actually do the show in front of people and all the things that the show is? It's a 90-minute program. We have lots of different types of stories. Why don't we try and do that? So we're going to do that on Tuesday night at the West End Cultural Center. And I am so happy that at the center of this will be William Prince, who he's been on our program a bunch before, but I love him, and I love what's happened to his career. It's like he's been strapped to this rocket that just went straight up in the air. He has had this extraordinary success. He's played at the Opry. He's been singing with Willie Nelson. He's a star, and he has agreed to come in the middle of his tour on a day off to come and hang out with us. And so he's going to be with us over the course of the night, singing some songs, and we'll talk to him. There's a lot to talk about. And then we're just going to talk about the city and talk about what's going on in Winnipeg. We're going to talk about some of the great Indigenous-led programs that are happening right there that I think would be an inspiration to many places across this country. Our man Negan Sinclair will be with us. He's writing a book to that end about lessons that Winnipeg has for the rest of the country about reconciliation. And any conversation with Negan Sinclair is a good conversation, so we're looking forward to that. We're going to be talking about the war in Ukraine and the fact that this war continues and that the people who have been displaced from that country are scattered across this country, including, of course, in Winnipeg. And we'll talk about how people still are coming together to support those folks. And I mean, here, I'm in Toronto right now. We've had no snow, and even if there was snow, a lot of the hills that you'd normally go tobogganing on, tobogganing has for some reason been outlawed because it's dangerous, I guess, and you can't do that.
And we're going to let you down.
Well, no, because I'm going to go on the Manitoban.
Oh, are you? Because we actually are having the mildest winter in years.
I'm hoping for winter, but we'll see. In the meantime, I'm going to go down the Manitoban, and who knows what will happen. Tune in to find out.
I also love that you're going to be updating what's going on at Capionk. It's been a very long time since we looked at that significant development right in the center of Winnipeg and where they're at. So you'll update us.
We'll tell you more about that. And I mean, one of the other things, we travel, and part of us going to other places is to give people who are elsewhere in the country kind of a sense. I had this idea when I started the program, that it was like Canada explaining itself to each other. And so if you can go to a place and have people explain what's great about the place that they're living in to people elsewhere in the country, they're going to vicariously kind of be excited about it. So we're doing that through culture and art and politics, but also food, which I love.
Tell me a little bit about the show you're doing and focusing on for the Monday show that's not the live Tuesday night at the West End.
Well, and politics is part of this. We were very lucky the day after the election to speak with the Premier. He came into the studio in Winnipeg on very little sleep to talk about his priorities. And one of them was the search in the landfill. And there is, as you well know, a number of people who are saying, when is that search going to begin? What's going to be happening? Update us, but also give us a sense that this isn't going to be shelved. And so we'll be speaking on Monday with the minister responsible. Nahani Fontaine will join us to talk not just about that search, but about the expectations broadly in the community. And again, this goes back to a little bit of what we were saying before, the lessons for the rest of the country in terms of what she says the government is committed to, and we'll hear from her on Monday.
Now, besides Manitobaganing, you also are a runner. Listeners that will know this. Are you going to do any of that in Winnipeg?
Of course. I run every day. And so one of the things I would just ask is if people have ideas on where I should go. I mean, I have a tendency to just go and explore. And if I think I should turn left, then I'll turn right instead. And I end up getting lost. And my run is a much longer run because I'm just out exploring. But if there are places that people definitely think I need to go, let me know. And I'll try and follow that route.
So for folks that can't make it to the broadcast Tuesday night at the West End, when is that going to air on the Current?
Following morning on Valentine's Day, the 14th of February. And perfect, given that our man singing the songs, William Prince, he's a love song writer at heart. And he's written some beautiful, beautiful love songs. And so I think it'll be perfect for the morning of Valentine's Day.
So many listeners are excited to see you here. They're writing to me. Speaking of the running routes, people are writing to me. I'm like, reach out to Matt, reach out to Matt. So we look forward to the shows. And thank you for your time this morning.
I really can't wait to get there. It's going to be great. And yeah, hopefully we'll see as many of you there as possible.
To Matt Galloway, host of The Current. I spoke with him yesterday. He's going to be in town for those 2 shows in Winnipeg next week, including the live show at the West End Cultural Centre next Tuesday night featuring this man, William Prince. It's going to be recorded for the next day. Do you want to go? I know you want to go, because tickets are sold out, but we have 2 up for grabs, 2 pairs, that is, so 4 tickets. Email win@cbc.ca. Tell us your favorite thing to do in Winnipeg, and good luck. We'll make a random draw of all the entries and let you know who won tomorrow.
Love's a situation, manifestation, representation of what we like in someone who might go the distance, be blowing in the wind with beginning and the end, over and over again. The truth about love, it don't come all at once. It gets easier and harder all the time. And if you don't give up, when pushing comes to shove, it gets easier and harder all the time. It gets easier and harder all the time. That you built will stand for much longer. Leave your ego outside, makes the foundation stronger. If you learn to compromise, it'll spare you some hell. Honey, we just might make it in spite of ourselves. Well, the truth about love, it don't come all at once. It gets easier and harder all the time. If you don't give up, when pushing comes to shove, it gets easier and harder all the time. Yeah, the truth about love, it don't come all at once. It gets easier and harder all the time. And if you don't give up, when pushing comes to shove, it gets easier and harder all the time. It gets easier and harder all the time. It gets easier and harder all the time.
William Prince, and Easier and Harder, the 2024 Juno nominee, by the way, just announced yesterday for Roots Album and Songwriter of the Year. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to congratulate him in person next week as he's part of the Current's live show at the West End Cultural Centre Tuesday night. If you want to win tickets, tell us what you love about living in Manitoba. You only can enter, we have 2 pairs of tickets up for grabs. You can only enter by email, and that email is win@cbc.ca.
There are stories you just can't stop thinking about. They take you somewhere, they introduce you to someone, they share something new with you. Liftoff. Those are the stories you want to share with your friends, and CBC's award-winning documentary team is bringing them to you every week on Storylines. Storylines, new this season on CBC Radio 1, and always on demand on the CBC Listen app.
The new CEO of Manitoba Public Insurance will be live in studio with us after 8 o'clock. So we'll hear what she plans to do for the future of the Crown Corporation. Stay tuned for that. 1 degree in Winnipeg. Someone on YouTube was laughing because they're watching from Honduras. And I was saying 1 is the hot spot. It is. I'm sure it's warmer in Honduras where you're watching from this morning. So thanks for tuning in. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. Well, next on the show, we have been talking about nursing students being the future of healthcare here in Manitoba. But one nursing student who was in our studio yesterday says they're facing challenges as they work toward finishing their certification. They posted a letter on social media. Luigi Imbrogno, a Red River College Polytechnic nursing student and a board member on the Canadian Nursing Students Association, was behind that post. Here's what he had to say to us yesterday.
There's a kind of financial insecurity that comes along with nursing school. From the start of the program, we're told working outside the program is not recommended because of the demands of the program, and then also having to be in the hospital 1 to 3 days a week for that clinical aspect where we're putting into practice what we're learning in the classroom.
Luigi Imbrogno. Now, financial distress was just one of the many concerns that Imbrogno also raised in the letter, wanting things like parking fees to be waived, worries about not wanting to park all day long, so parking further away, and then facing some safety concerns. He cited specifically around HSC in Winnipeg. Now, to talk about some of the concerns, Darlene Jackson is with us, president of the Manitoba Nurses Union. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what's your reaction to students putting out this letter?
Well, I'm glad to see that students are proactive and advocating for themselves. That tells me they're going to be great patient advocates. So I think that's really a plus. I have had an email previously from Luigi speaking about other issues, and I am planning to meet with him week after next and have some discussion about these issues. So I will be glad to discuss these very issues with them at the same time.
What are your thoughts that nursing students would be speaking out and asking for improvements at this stage? Like, would we have seen that kind of advocacy in the past? Because often we've heard healthcare professionals say, that they fear speaking out, that it's part of the culture just to sort of put in these long hours, for example, and such. So what are your thoughts on the students taking this action?
Well, I think that we're seeing many nurses speak out on issues of patient safety, on issues of violence in healthcare, and on workload. So I think this trend is just sort of moving in the direction where healthcare workers and now students want to be heard. They want the public to understand what their issues are, and they're willing to speak out about it. And I think this is going to be a growing trend.
How far might this go in changing the culture in nursing? Because it can be implied in the culture of healthcare overall, as I alluded to, that you do put in those long hours and work around the clock, and that this is just expected of you. And Luigi's in here saying, it's free labor, long hours, and we have issues here. Do you think that the students changing their culture when they're going through the stages of learning this could extend into the overall nursing culture in Manitoba?
Oh, I absolutely believe so, because over the past probably 10 years, as I came into contact with students, they are much better advocates for themselves, much better advocates for their coworkers, which means when they get into the workplace, they are going to be great advocates for their patients. So I think it's a growing trend, and I think culture in nursing is changing. We're as nurses, we're not just going to sit around and have violence put against us without saying a word about it. It is not part of the job.
Where does the nurses union stand on the issues specifically that were raised? You mentioned you're meeting with Luigi. Are you going to back his fight for parking compensation, for example?
Well, I'll put it very frankly. I believe that we are in a critical nursing shortage. There is many issues at Health Sciences Centre with security and safety in and around the buildings and in the parkades. We have actually talked with Shared Health about dealing with the parking fees. Not only the exorbitant, but now you're paying to park in a building where your car may or may not be broken into. So I would advocate for free parking for every staff member at HSC as well as the students. when it comes to safety, we filed a grievance. We're going to arbitration, specifically having to do with the safety around HSC and some of the issues that the employer hasn't addressed. So I completely agree with him that the HSC campus is not a safe place, and it needs to be dealt with, and we are dealing with that through a grievance.
What are the issues that you have raised around safety? We heard it through his point of view yesterday, but what's the framework of your grievance, Darlene?
Well, we had asked for many changes for the parkades, having security, having better lighting, having someone actually move through the parkade to ensure that when a nurse comes out of work, her vehicle hasn't been broken into or hasn't been stolen. So it's just, we've asked for that level. We've also asked to have the stairwells locked because we have many instances of nurses saying, I'm going up the stairwell to get to my vehicle and someone is injecting drugs on the floor beside me. So we've asked for that. We've talked about having the doors, having a shorter open time so that there's less opportunity for people to get into the parkade. We've talked about, the other lots because you have to wait in line to get into a parkade. So you park on a ground lot until that point. And we've talked about lighting there, about having more safety and just having a safer environment where staff do not have to feel as if they're putting their life at risk, moving between their workplace and their vehicle.
Back to the issue of the nurses and some of nursing students, rather, and some of the other issues that they've raised. Can you help us understand whether or not nursing students are treated different than other students, other medical students studying to be doctors? Are they paid for their clinical time in a different way than nurses are when they're going through those programs?
That I cannot speak to because I'm not sure of that, and I know that some medical students are paid but further into their career. But I mean, we've been talking at both provincial and the national level with regards to the practicum, where the student nurse is at the end of their fourth year. They're in a 12-week practicum, and they are, been precepted by a nurse in the facility. And we've been saying for a long time, not only do they have to pay tuition to do that, but they don't get paid to do that. So we've been speaking, on a national level of how do we advocate for that? Like, how do we, at the very least, advocate for them to have some payment there?
When you were going through school, or when you hear from other nurses recently who would have gone through school in Manitoba, did they have similar concerns? Maybe not voice them in this organized way as these students are, but around feeling like they're offering free labor, for example?
I think that's been a long-standing issue. When I graduated, and that was a very long time ago, it was just a given. You paid for your education, you went into the hospital, you worked, and that was how it was. But I'm hearing this concern more and more from students over the last probably 4 years as they come up.
Thank you very much for weighing in on this morning. Anything I missed asking you that you'd like to add?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Joining us from Ottawa, actually, she's out at a conference right now. Darlene Jackson weighing in on the conversation. She's president of the Manitoba Nurses Union. We have reached out to Shared Health for a response. We have yet to hear back. And if you missed the initial interview that prompted all of this, you can go to our CBC Listen app, or you can go back to our show yesterday on YouTube as Luigi and Bragno was in studio with us talking about concerns facing nursing students here in Manitoba. They posted an open letter. Let's get to what's going on in the news this morning and what's developing. Heather Wells is in with headlines.
Good morning. Well, some tough decisions at the City of Winnipeg as it prepares to release its 2024 budget today. Mayor Scott Gillingham has already committed to keeping the property tax increase to 3.5%. But Finance Chair Jeff Perwati says the city is still struggling to keep up with rising costs. And Peguis First Nation has hired new lawyers to fight a $172 million lawsuit over outstanding loans. We'll hear those stories and more in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the forecast here. We do have a fog advisory for Winnipeg, the Red River Valley, and Pembina Valley, as well the Interlake and Southeast Man. And so it's going to be thick in places out there, not so much in downtown here at all. We're not seeing that. But 1 degree is our temperature now. We'll head for 2. It's going to rain tonight And then tomorrow afternoon, this is all going to change to snow. So we're in a bit of a shifting pattern the next couple of days. If you need us on the drive, please give us a call. Corey's had a lot of calls around the Interlake and Riding Mountain National Park about fog. And so we know that's out there. If it's causing issues elsewhere, please update the list, 788-3093. And if there's any major problems that are just developing in traffic or on your commute, let us know. Coming up after 8 o'clock on the show, the new CEO of Manitoba Public Insurance will be in studio with us to talk about its future and how she plans to lead it. After, to say the least, a tumultuous year and the ousting of the last CEO and the strike. So stay tuned for the conversation.
On Cue with Tom Power.
In the new series Feud, Capote versus the Swans, the actor Molly Ringwald plays Joanne Carson, wife of Johnny Carson, and friend to the writer Truman Capote. Molly opens up about that role and what it was actually like to be an icon back in the days of the Breakfast Club.
I have just as many feelings as you do, and it hurts just as much when somebody steps all over them.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcast.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
A program in Montreal is making sure people who are struggling to pay rent don't end up homeless by giving them cash. It is a straightforward solution, but it's helped hundreds of people keep their homes. We'll tell you their story coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. In Pakistan, explosions have killed 26 people outside the offices of two political parties. An ambulance rushes the wounded to hospital in a town near Quetta. The attacks come ahead of tomorrow's elections. This is the latest in a campaign marred by violence and harassment. Much of it is directed at Imran Khan and his party. Even though he is in jail, the former prime minister is a big factor in the election. Salima Shivji has more from Islamabad.
At a small gathering days before the election, Imran Khan supporters rally, calling for everyone to vote for the former prime minister. Khan is not here. He's in jail, barred from running in this election. And his party, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, has been the target of a crackdown, what they say is orchestrated by the military to sideline them, a charge the army denies. Shoaib Shaheen is still openly campaigning, but many of his fellow PTI politicians are in hiding.
There is a hindrance on behalf of the police, on behalf of the administration. The police is harassing our supporters, and sometimes they are stopping their businesses.
Observers say this is the least credible election in years, in a country that has seen its fair share of vote-rigging accusations. The man widely expected to win Thursday's vote is Nawaz Sharif, a three-time prime minister looking for a fourth mandate as he works the crowd. Sharif was previously barred from contesting another election in 2017 and convicted of corruption, but those rulings have been overturned. His path to power cleared by an alleged backroom deal with Pakistan's army generals. For many here, even those attending political rallies, the voting process offers little hope. I have no faith in this country. We need brand new politicians, says 23-year-old Pulwasha Afaq. There are no fair elections here. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Islamabad.
Voters in Nevada are making it clear they are not impressed with their pool of Republican presidential nominees. In last night's primary, more than 62% voted for none of the three candidates on the ballot. That includes former U.S. Ambassador and South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Republican frontrunner Donald Trump was not on the ballot, but he will be on the ballot for the Nevada caucuses tomorrow. A surprising defeat for Republicans in the House of Representatives last night. Members voted not to impeach U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. The vote was an attempt to hold the Biden administration accountable for the issues at the border with Mexico. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me now from Washington. And Richard, what happened with this vote?
Yeah, Republicans simply didn't have the votes, ending in an embarrassing defeat of their own creation, of the slim Republican majority voting to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. He would have been the second cabinet official to be impeached in U.S. history. Republicans gave speech after speech accusing Mayorkas of breaking the law by allowing millions of migrants to cross illegally into the U.S. from Mexico. But in the end, the impeachment vote backfired, exposing dysfunction within the party and a failure of Speaker Johnson's leadership. He's breaking the cardinal rule. You don't put a bill on the floor unless you know you have the votes. At least 3 Republicans joined with Democrats and voted against impeachment. Republican Ken Buck voted against his party, saying impeaching Mayorkas would set a dangerous precedent.
I think the principle is very clear that Mayorkas did not commit a high crime or misdemeanor. We are setting new levels, low levels, for these impeachments.
Now, Republicans are making immigration a central issue this election, but many say this vote was embarrassing and shameful.
Richard, what does this all mean going forward?
Well, the House Speaker says he'll try again, likely within days. But remember, this party has such a slim majority in the House. Not all Republicans could show up to last night's vote. So get ready for round 2. But even if the House somehow impeaches Mayorkas, the trial will certainly not pass the Democrat-controlled Senate. So there's lots of politics here and show, but all set up to fail in the end.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is meeting with Israeli leaders in Jerusalem.
We now have a response from Hamas to the proposal that was put on the table. The way forward, we're looking at it intensely, as is, I know.
The counteroffer from Hamas calls for a 4.5-month truce. During that time, all hostages would be released in 3 stages. Palestinians imprisoned in Israel would be freed. Hamas also wants Israel to pull its forces out of Gaza and to allow more aid into the territory. The details of the original deal proposed last week have not been made public. While those negotiations carry on in Israel, politicians here in Canada are pushing universities to provide a safe environment. 13 MPs have written a letter. They're asking universities what they're doing to protect students and staff who advocate on behalf of Jews or Palestinians. Rafi Boudjikanian reports.
Montreal's Concordia University last November. Palestinian and Jewish student groups clashing over the fighting between Israel and Hamas. Security guards and even police intervened. Also in November, York University threatened to punish 3 student unions over a statement they issued. It called what Palestinians were going through genocide and saluted Hamas's attack that killed 1,200 Israelis.
We should have this conversation with the university presidents.
Shafkat Ali is the Liberal MP for Brampton Centre. He has written a letter to Canadian universities signed by 10 other Liberals and the Green Party's 2 MPs. It asks the schools how they are protecting students, faculty and staff from repercussions for speaking their minds. The letter does not mention specific incidents.
Freedom of expression is a fundamental to our democracy.
Dr. Yipeng Ji is welcoming the move.
It, I think, calls attention to the kind of environment and this climate.
G was a medical resident at the University of Ottawa until it suspended him over pro-Palestinian social media posts. He says the school eventually offered to reinstate him, but he declined. He wonders if the spotlight from this kind of letter might have made a difference in his suspension.
Maybe that wouldn't have happened in the first place.
The MPs want the universities to respond by the end of February. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
Parts of Kyiv have no electricity this morning. The mayor says power lines were downed last night in a Russian attack. Air raid sirens warning people to take shelter. A wave of 64 Russian missiles and drones were fired across Ukraine. Air defense systems were triggered. Buildings in Kyiv caught fire. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says at least 2 people have been killed and 10 more have been injured. The Roman Catholic Archbishop of Montreal is taking the Quebec government to court, arguing Quebec's medical aid in dying law violates the Charter of Rights. It forces Catholic palliative care homes to offer medically assisted deaths. Alison Northcott reports.
It goes against the freedom of conscience.
Archbishop Christian Lapine is asking the court to invalidate part of Quebec's end-of-life care law that requires palliative care homes to offer medical aid in dying. The court challenge centers around a facility located in a former Catholic church. The lawsuit says medical aid in dying is against church doctrine and Lapine's personal convictions. Quebec's law, the Archbishop says, violates the provincial and Canadian charters.
It's freedom of religion, but also freedom of conscience. And it's about that we want to live in a democracy, that we want where we want freedom of conscience, where we want for the individual, for institutions.
This has been a major issue since medical assisted dying became legal in Canada, from coast to coast.
Tim Holland is a MAID provider and head of the bioethics department at Dalhousie University in Halifax. He says while Quebec has its own provincial law, there have been similar debates in other provinces around faith-based institutions under the federal law.
While I do understand where the Catholic Church is coming from, it's essential to understand that these palliative care facilities are built for patients. And so at the heart of this, we have to respect patient rights.
While some provinces have made some exemptions, the Quebec government said in a statement its intentions are clear to ensure anyone in a palliative care home can receive medical aid in dying if they wish. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
If you have been following the plight of those orcas trapped in ice off the coast of Japan, we have some good news. The whales are free. People around the world have been watching drone footage of the orcas. It showed the pod of about 10 whales crammed into the same hole, surrounded by broken chunks of ice. They were poking their heads out, gasping for air. The nearest country, Japan, said it was impossible to rescue them. But officials monitoring the situation now say they believe the orcas escaped safely.
Could you be there?
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Easy song to love and easy story to love as well, right? Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on CBC 89.3. You also might be joining us on the CBC Listen app or on YouTube this morning. Thanks to everyone who's tuning in there. Someone actually wrote into us and said they're listening because it's one way that they're improving their English skills because English isn't their first language. So I love that, but don't quote me. Oh, no pressure. I love that people tune in all kinds of ways. Well, if you are tuning in from Manitoba, there's high interest in my guest this half hour. We're going to be in conversation with the new CEO of Manitoba Public Insurance. She's live in studio. We'll hear what she plans to do for the future of the Crown Corporation moving forward. Also, you're writing to us about the city budget. Randy Stanton saying he hopes today transit will be addressed in the budget. Kev Roberts saying it was a windfall year for snow clearing and a rough year for potholes. So he's awaiting to hear what that means for our budget concerns in the city of Winnipeg. Heather Wells is in with our headlines today to tee up a little bit of this. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, and the draft budget will be released this afternoon at 2. Mayor Scott Gillingham has committed to keeping the property tax increase to 3.5% over his term in office. However, one expert warns it's not going to be enough to maintain services amid rising costs. We'll hear more. And warm weather continues to prevent some winter roads from opening. 4 isolated Northern First Nations declared a state of emergency yesterday. Leaders say climate change has made the winter road season too unreliable. They're asking for all-season roads. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
It was interesting, Corey, when we were up in that region, in the Island Lake region and in St. Teresa Point, the thing that stays with me about the isolation and the different ways, the limited ways of getting in and out of community was when the patients that needed dialysis were getting loaded into a water taxi down by the dock, and they leave their community across the water for the day. This is, of course, summer months. And then all day they're there getting dialysis in another community and then coming back.
And that's their day.
And that's their day because of the time it takes to be traveling and where the services are, on top of the disconnections we're talking about the lack of an all-weather road. So that's specific to St. Teresa Point. But if you want to read a comprehensive story about how this warm weather's affected all of the communities up that way, please go to our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba, as Heather mentioned. Abby Adeyemi, let's get into the forecast today.
Yeah, I just checked my radar now. It says the fog advisory is ended for Winnipeg, but it's still something for other regions. So you just need to remember that. Winnipeg is currently at 1 degrees with cloudy skies as we move through the day. The cloudiness will definitely be staying with us. And the high for today is expected to reach 2 degrees. And talking about that fog advisory, advisory ending for Winnipeg, it's still in effect for some other areas in southern Manitoba. And the affected areas would most likely include the Pembina Valley, the Red River Valley, parts of the Interlake, the White Shell, and of course, southeast Manitoba. If you're still finding yourself in that foggy condition, be advised near zero visibility is expected. And for some of the commuters this morning, it's already a code for them where we hear that visibility suddenly reduced for them. But right now, Winnipeg is at 1.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey, people are writing to us on our YouTube channel, and they're biking this morning out there. Specifically, Jake wrote in Macunui, and Jake says he rides his bike from Mayfair all the way through Leela and McPhillips. He says he's careful, but he sees close calls, and people are calling in the fog unreal at points this morning. And other people saying you're braver than me. I don't like driving that stretch. So we often hear that McPhillips can be challenging if you're cycling or commuting that way, but I guess with the fog, it'd be just an added issue, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just sometimes those cars are cutting close, and it can really catch you off guard, especially if you don't see it coming in the fog.
So watch in the city for folks.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But the biggest issues I've been hearing have been out of the city, particularly in the Interlake and kind of the western Manitoba, Minnedosa, Riding Mountain area. Got a call from Colleen who said Highway 7 from Toulon to the perimeter was very, very foggy. As well, Ricardo going south down Highway 10 through Riding Mountain, also very foggy and slippery as well. That seems to be where kind of the worst issues are in terms of fog affecting folks' commutes this morning. Do want to keep an eye out if you are heading down northbound Main at York. Heard about an hour ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, about 2 trucks stalled in the far left lane. That may be causing some issues for folks as well. Other than that, things seem to be going fairly smooth, with the exception, of course, of Abinogi-Mikina eastbound between Pembina and River. There has been, until February 19th, there's sewer work going on there, blocking the curb and middle lane. So that's disrupting a lot of folks' commutes. But if you see anything else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, Manitoba Public Insurance does have a new president and CEO, effective immediately. Satvir Jatana now leads the organization. She has a wealth of experience with the Crown Corporation. She served as MPI's vice president and chief customer officer for nearly 9 years. MPI has been, as you might recall, without a CEO since last May, after the former president was released after an internal review that found a number of different problems. And then, of course, we had the strike last summer. Satvir Jatana joins us in studio. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So you're stepping into this new role at MPI. How do you describe what you hope your leadership will look like?
My leadership is really deeply rooted in having a strong alignment with our employees, with our stakeholders, with our regulator, Public Utility Board, under the guidance of our board of directors and government as obviously our shareholders. Mm-hmm.
Will your style be informed at all for places you worked at before MPI? We mentioned you have quite a history there, but you worked privately for Canadians, for Princess Auto. Will some of those experiences in the private sector translate to what you hope to do with MPI or not?
You know, absolutely. Leadership is something that it's a journey and not a destination. And I do believe, what I have acquired over the years through working for some of these great reputable organizations like Walmart, Princess Auto, Canadians, have all made me who I am. And some of those foundational pieces, being a servant leader, serving your team, and the president and CEO's job is there to enable the team. So, now I have the opportunity to be in that role and really to display that in my actions and decisions.
You have some things that you're going to have to work on right away. Obviously, I mentioned that the past CEO left the position. And if listeners, just to catch listeners up on, reminding ourselves what happened there, that was due to work-related conduct, but it also included some overspending with Project Nova. So there were untendered contracts, there were pay increases for execs. How will you ensure that spending is kept under control?
I deeply believe in our mission, and that is to provide exceptional service and products led by affordable rates. And the only way we can deliver on that commitment is if we have a fiscal prudence principles in place. We are responsible with the ratepayers' money that we are entrusted with. And balancing the need to progress, but progress at a speed that it is not giving rate shocks to our ratepayers, and it's in alignment with what we're here for, and here to serve Manitoban and provide value.
Do you have a sense of what might need to shift, though, to get the fiscal picture back on track, given that you've been involved with MPI for 9 years and as VP there, VP and Chief Customer Officer, about what went wrong and how you hope to kind of make sure that doesn't happen again?
There's one way of learning is always, by your kind of failure. And as an organization, I recognize that we've fallen short of our promises at time, and perhaps more in the recent years. I've also been part of this organization, where things were going well and we were delivering on promises. So I want to kind of build on some of our past practices, but also learn from our recent events and steer the ship in a way that is staying true to who we are as MPI, and that's really at the heart of who MPI is.
One of the findings, the former PC government commissioned this report, and one of the findings said MPI had a bloated management structure. What do you think of that assessment?
There are a number of areas that the E&Y review report points. It talks about having the right strategy, having the right structure, roles and roles and responsibility, clarity and roles and responsibility. It also talks about having decisions that are informed by data and data that is available. It talks about strengthening our financial processes and systems so we are able to provide the right information when it's required. And it also talks about elevating our workforce planning, ensuring that we have the right people in the right position, and balancing the need to manage the business, but also continue to grow and continue to improve. So it focuses on a lot of those areas, and I recognize that management layer was one of those areas. So what I can say that we are going to be focusing on first developing a plan and then ensuring that we have the right structure, we have the right layer, we have the right management count, and we have the right number of frontline employees providing service to Manitoban.
So you're reassessing from the top, it sounds like, as you come up with the plan and a strategy.
Absolutely. This is our opportunity to get it right, and where we have fallen short to correct some of those areas. So, yeah, coming into this role, I'm fortunate that I've been part of the team. I've been working alongside the team, so I have a deep understanding and passion for a Crown corporation. So that I'm not going to spend next 6 months in learning the business, but perhaps I get to build it from here. So this is my opportunity to do that with our team.
Speaking of timelines, given that, as you said, you don't have to you're not starting from scratch, you're coming in and you want to have a plan and to look at possible change where needed. Will you put a timeline on that? Like if you're going to change management structure, for example, if that's one of the things in the strategy, will you hope to see those results in the next 3 months, 6 months? Are you a benchmark kind of a leader?
I tend to work with a great sense of urgency, but I recognize when you're steering a ship of MPI, it's a large company. So I wanted to do it methodically, but do it with a great sense of urgency. I recognize there's 2,000 of my team members looking at me and expecting direction and leadership. I'm also, it's not lost on me that Manitobans also are looking for MPI to deliver on its mission. So this is my priority, and this is where I'm going to give all of my effort and skills to provide the leadership that my team needs and what Manitobans expect of me.
8:22, we're in conversation with Satvir Jatana, the new CEO of Manitoba Public Insurance. I want to ask you about some things on behalf of Manitobans. You're talking about, obviously, people are interested in what you will do. Due to the strike, there were these claims that were backed up, and we did hear, the last we reported was that MPI had told us, your organization said that you hope that backlog will be cleared by spring. Any update on that?
Absolutely. That's one area I would love to highlight. So, when we came out of the strike, there was over 40,000 appointments, customers waiting on appointments. There was large backlog in claims and adjusting, especially in estimating, driver testing. And what I can tell you that our team, within the first 6 weeks of returning back, they put their heads down and they went right to work. We cleared almost 92% of the backlog when it came to appointments. Now, you also would remember that last year was one of the worst years for hails. We never had that many hail claims in probably the history of MPI. So our team was dealing with some abnormal claim count, but we have made great progress. What I can tell you today that customers can go into any of our location and have an appointments within a couple of weeks for these large kind of a needs when it comes to adjusting or driver testing or estimating. And our team is hard at work clearing the backlog. And we've already cleared for the driver testing side. We're still working on some of the claim side, but we're confident that we'll clear that in the definitely by spring.
And spring to you is beginning of March, end of March, or
it's like for many Manitobans, I would say, end of March is probably what we call spring.
Also during the strike, we did interviews with some drivers that were waiting months for repairs. They were saying they should get their premiums refunded for that. I know in December, MPI told CBC it wasn't considering refunds in most cases. Now that you're at the helm, do you still stand by that?
It's difficult to talk about individual cases, but what I can tell you that insurance needs to stay active even when there is a claim, and that is to protect for any other incident or any other damage to the vehicle. So that's kind of what I can tell you without knowing any individual. And if there are individual cases, our team is always available to deal with that. Our priority is to address that backlog. And you mentioned repair. Some of the absolutely it's been an abnormal year for us. The other issue that we face in Manitoba is also, especially after or during the COVID, we're still dealing with the repair backlog, delays in parts, and some of the dilemmas and I'll say issues that our repair shops are also facing.
To repair automobiles.
Yeah, so it's a combination of all of those things. But MPI is doing what we can to ensure that the backlog at our end is moving and it is cleared by the spring.
Good luck in your new role. Thank you very much for making time for CBC and for being in studio. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me again.
That is Satvir Jatana, who is the new CEO of Manitoba Public Insurance. 8:26 a.m. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks so much for being with us this morning, wherever you're starting your day. A lot of us have been kind of at the back door going, light jacket, sweater underneath, rubber boots, crampons, a little slippery. We are about to have another shift. So tonight we're expecting rain, 5 millimeters in Winnipeg. By tomorrow night, we're expecting snow. So we're going to see how much comes and whether or not this holds in our forecast. For your day today, though, the headline is the fog, and the headline is a high of 2 degrees. And that now headline warning specifically, the fog advisory rather, is for outside the city of Winnipeg now. Winnipeg, that fog advisory has now been lifted. So a little bit of good news for us this morning, but it's still just unusually warm out there. Well, we have been playing Juno songs, Juno-nominated songs, because the announcement came out yesterday about all of the different artists that were up for Juno nods this year. The list had so many great artists, and one of them is Leith Ross, one of Manitoba's breakout artists last year. Their album To Learn is now nominated for Alternative Album of the Year for 2024. And from it, this is Leith Ross and You on My Arm.
With you to parties, you would wear a dress, and I would say, I'm sorry for something, don't know what it'd be. But you'd say nothing, it's nothing, and smile at me. I wanna sit around and watch you do your hair, talk it all into the ground. Have a ceremony there for
Leith Ross announced yesterday up for Juno next month. Nominee for Alternative Album of the Year. This tune's called You on My Arm. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to CBC's Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. Coming up on The Current today, Matt Galloway is looking at a program in Montreal called Rapid Entry to Housing, giving people who are struggling to find housing a short-term cash injection. Could be one way to prevent homelessness before it begins. So interesting conversation coming up on The Current. But first, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, that fog advisory has now ended, and we are left with a cloudy day. Expect some showers this evening, turning to snow later tomorrow. For today, a high of 2. The city of Winnipeg is making some tough decisions as it prepares to release its 2024 budget. Mayor Scott Gillingham has already committed to keeping the property tax increase to 3.5%. But Finance Chair Jeff Berwadi says the city is still struggling to keep up with rising costs.
We did ask departments to get out their pencils and figure out every opportunity to minimize the impact of inflation. And try to minimize any impact that it would have on the delivery of services to Winnipeggers.
Berwadi says there are many things driving up costs, including labor, fuel, and construction materials. He says Winnipeggers should not expect any major funding announcements for projects like the widening of Kenaston Boulevard. The budget will be released at 2 this afternoon. Peguis First Nation has hired new lawyers to fight a legal claim over outstanding loans. A company called Bridging Finance, Inc., also known as BFI, lent Peguis money at prime plus 11% interest. That company is now insolvent. A court-appointed receiver for BFI sued Peguis in 2022 for $172 million. Peguis chief Stan Bird was elected after that lawsuit was filed.
With the BFI hanging over our head, it's almost like we can't do very much until that's resolved. And we do have our legal team looking at that right now. We brought on a new firm to address that.
In a statement of defense filed by a previous legal firm, Peguis calls the loans illegal, unconscionable, and a Ponzi scheme. Warm weather continues to prevent some winter roads from opening. 4 isolated Northern First Nations declared a state of emergency yesterday. Ian Bushy is Manitoba's Minister of Municipal and Northern Relations. He says the province, federal government, and First Nations leaders are already talking about what to do. Bushy says they're looking at different strategies to make sure communities get the goods they need.
The role of the federal government, too, plays a prominent role here, too. And I mean, for us, we're looking to partner and advocate for the First Nation communities in terms of the federal responsibility here as well. So those are continuing discussions that we've already had, will continue to have going forward. A lot of it is at the whim of the weather, too.
First Nations leaders continue to press for all-season roads for northern communities, saying climate change has made the winter road season too unreliable. A unique piece of Manitoba wetland is now in the hands of the Nature Conservancy of Canada. It has acquired a 78-hectare piece of land east of St. Rita, that's east of Anola. The property was donated to the Conservancy by the Rosenberg family of Winnipeg. It is made up of wetland and highly sought-after peatland. Area manager Tim Teetart says it is part of the Conservancy's efforts to save wetlands and peatland.
Wetlands are one of those kind of habitats that we are losing. It's estimated within Canada that we've lost about 70% of wetlands in the southern portion of the country, kind of where the majority of the population lives.
Teetart says peatland has the ability to hold in and store a vast amount of moisture, increasingly important, he says, with the frequency of severe weather events. Well, one person is in stable condition after a fire officials say was started by smoking. Emergency crews were called to the 200 block of Broadway around 5:30 yesterday afternoon. Everyone in the 3-story downtown apartment building made it out on their own, except one person who was helped out by fire crews. That person is stable. Damage was mostly contained to one suite, and fire officials say it was caused by improper disposal of smoking materials. Want to spice up your soda? North America's snacks are getting spicier, and Coca-Cola wants in on the trend. The Atlanta-based beverage giant today introduced Coca-Cola Spiced and Coca-Cola Spiced Zero Sugar. The new Coke flavors go on sale in the U.S. and in Canada on February 19th. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, let's do a team vote here. Coca-Cola Spice, thumbs up or down, Heather Wells?
You know, what is the spice? Is it cayenne pepper? I don't know.
I'm pro spice.
Corey's pro. Abby?
I don't know. I need to taste it first.
I don't know, right? Yeah, me and Travis are looking really
I'm thinking
skeptical
about like
behind
a
YouTube
spiced
there.
rum kind of thing.
Yeah, see,
kind of
that's
nice.
nice,
You
yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll see. Let's see what's going on one last time with Abby and weather, and then we'll get some traffic on.
Yep, the fog advisory early in effect for several areas in southern Manitoba has ended. However, tonight expect periods of rain and then changing to snow tomorrow afternoon. And I'm just worried about tomorrow because Thursday is looking like it's going to be quite messy, right from maybe later in the late afternoon all the way into the night because of what we're expecting. And the winds that's going to be gusting to 50 tomorrow is also going to be like a concern because if we're getting snow and we're getting the wind gusting for 50, Brandon and Winnipeg will definitely, if you're going to be traveling out, advise you to take it easy. And you might want to replan if you're going to be traveling Thursday into Friday. That's just a piece of head-ups for you. Brandon is currently at -1, Thompson -18, Churchill -33, Gimli it's 0 and cloudy, Steinbach and Morris is at 0, and Winnipeg is at 1 heading to a high of 2.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Something to pay attention to for sure, with 2 to 4 centimeters of snow is the amount. So, yeah, could be an issue. We'll watch. Corey.
Crystal called about an excruciatingly slow train crossing the perimeter at Dugald, backing up traffic both ways there. That's the east perimeter there. So look out for
I
that.
believe the technical term is a wah, wah.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Crystal. Thanks,
Thank
Corey.
you. Yeah, have a good one.
All right, thanks to our live team, Corey Funk, Abby Adeyemi behind the YouTube controls, Travis Peterson, and in our news department, Megan Ketchison, Joni Nicolo, as well as Heather Walls. Thanks to our hardworking team of associate producers, our leaders in unit, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson. My name is Marcy Marcusa. Take care, be well, Manitoba. Thanks for listening, everyone. We're back again tomorrow on all of our various platforms, and we hope you can tune in. The Current is next.